Preface. Recently, at a Thanksgiving dinner, my favorite uncle introduced me as someone who creates pit bulls. Knowing my uncle's evil sense of humor and the predilection to inflict embarrassing situations about myself to see how I get out of them, I knew I was entering a frame. My uncle's friend was obviously intelligent and well-polite and, on everything, a good and class person. So, of course, your answer to my exposure as a devotee of pit bulldogs was something that like a shock to him. My God! My God! He said, shaking his head in moderate disapproval. I looked at him confused and answered, brainwashing through the media, imagine. After making this pronouncement, I censored him kindly for allowing an educated man like him to be deceived as easily. And because he was polite, intelligent, and an open mind, he heard me as I explained how pit bull really was. He apparently gave me some credit to what I had to say, since he left that night with a comment that he wanted to talk to me about the possibility of getting a pit bull puppy, to my uncle's surprise, who knew a lot well, from experience with my dogs, that pit bulls, despite his opposite reputation, possibly has the best and most stable willingness of all dogs. Unfortunately, it should be supposed that any non-familiar person with pit bulldogs who decide to read this book has had brainwashing media, because certainly most of the audience had brainwashing, and where would they have taken the information from? It is expected, however, that the reader will be receptive enough to consider this more deserving of dogs for their own merits and not for their reputation. It may seem that where there is smoke there must be at least a small fire, and for sure, there is. There are dogs with such skills for the fight, and as long as they like to fight, they can be a danger to other dogs, indifferent in size, and for other animals, too. Thus, the owner of a pit bulldog must be a responsible person and not violate the laws as many others do. Since pit bull is a unique dog creation, special precautions are needed to keep it. I have separated a chapter that details some of the systems to maintain more than one pit bull, and of course they can be used even if you keep only one. It is easy since you know how, and worth it, since these dogs are truly special. Some may think I'm soft with arena dog owners, or creators like them prefer to be called, but there are plenty of other writers who know little about the creator pit dog but condemn them completely and regularly, so why should I join it? I think my position is more about putting things from the perspective for readers who have been fed on stories of how little kittens and small dogs are used as bait in training a pit dog. And also, despite a scientific disposition, I am a romantic hopelessness regarding this breed, for I see this dog as the bravest and heroic of all dogs, and I am not convinced that they would be like this without the furious sport that forged them. Perhaps one reason why I am so tolerant and understanding a dog creator pit is that in my youth was my luck to meet distinct men who were dog breeders. Pit. Although they could stand to watch a dog pit suffered punishments in a competition, they were more affectionate than many people about animals, and they were genuine dog lovers, too. They owned dogs much more responsible than the vast majority of people, including many of those who criticize the dog's creator. My old mentor Bob Wallace, in particular, was highly critical about the irresponsible behavior of most dog owners. And I never met anyone who had a better feeling for dogs or who had more careful. This is my third book about the American Terrier Bull. Ideally, books should be read in order, starting with This is the American Pit Bull Terrier, This is the American Terrier Pit Bull, then the Book of the American Pit Bull Terrier, the Book of the Terrier Pit Bull American, and ending with this one. There is no evil, however, to read the books out of the sequence. In fact, this book is somehow a primer than the other two, as it deals with basic matter as elementary things such as food and dwelling from the American Terrier Pit Bull. Some readers may be shocked that I provide a widespread form of training for the fight in this book. But why not? The practice of the dog fight is still incessant, so why not help novices arrange their charges with the best possible condition and food methods? Despite everything, my thesis has always been that dogs of competition are not cruel if done properly. Also, exactly how all this is done will be of interest to the owner of pit bull and perhaps even for those devotees of the poor cervical dogs that have been horrified and sick by the stories of how the creators of the pit dog are constantly on the lock of small dogs to use them as training guinea pigs. One of the problems with a third book is to avoid the repetition of the already discussed in the other two. However, some things are worth repeated, and other items need beautification. Generally, however, the material in this book is what I still had to say about what I consider to be the most extraordinary and unique creation of dogs that ever existed. An important note for readers of this book. You will realize by reading this book that my way of thinking about dog fights is very different from the way you think of those released in magazines, newspapers, radio and television and other information that pushes to you. Different from the media, I'm not against brave dog struggles. I like dog competitions, and I like most arena dog breeders with which I came across. So naturally any book I write about the best fighting dog in the world will partially be about arena and creators competitions, and will blow their enemies. I'm on the dog side, obviously. You can conclude while reading this book that I have been firm in expressing both my tastes and dislikes. You may even feel that I was very firm. That's right, but less you know what my position is. But the only thing you shouldn't conclude about what I said in this book is that I would like to see you get involved with dog fights. I think you shouldn't. I think you should stay far from dog quarrels anyway, and the reason I think is based on a very important consideration: dog fights are illegal in most places where this book will be read. Now I can sit in front of a typewriter every day and write a new manuscript saying why I think the dog fight is a human and sensitive activity and because I think people against them are humanists without brain and no courage, but this does not change the fact that the laws I curse against sharp teeth, and I would not want you to crash in them. The laws are mostly against productive and notorious, but you cannot use the idiocy of laws as a defense if you are quoted for breaking them. I hate to say this, but the best way to avoid being quoted by dog fight against you is to be totally innocent. One way, for example, to be sure that you will never be arrested in a dog fight is never to go to one where they are illegal. By way of prevention, if you are not familiar with some of the many restricted laws against dog fight in the United States, I will reproduce here a part of the text of the section dealing with speculation in dog fights of the 1976 federal law. Many state laws are even worse. Listen to my advice, don't get caught by breaking any of these laws against dog fight. Use any legal reason why you want to educate the public and change the laws, but avoid breaking them. The humanimaniacs who made the laws pass would like to see nothing less than seeing you stuck and tightly fined for something to do with the pit. Don't give them to that satisfaction. The mutts with the mump. When someone not used to the breed takes his first look at an assortment of American Pit Bull Terriers, he may not be impressed. Some have large heads, while another, in comparison, has narrow heads. Some of the dogs are small, and even the big ones look like the soft hunting dogs. What these dogs have in common is not apparently readable to the casual observer. The trained eye, however, notices the muscular bodies, the agile movement, and the jaws that even the narrow-headed dogs have. All dogs, from the smallest to the largest, have a fierce aura. Even so, few people will not believe that these dogs are the most formidable of canines. The supremacy of the American Terrier Pit Bull has been demonstrated frequently. When we consider that this creation was created for the struggle for at least several hundred years, and most likely several thousands of years, it is no surprise that it would triumph, despite the size, on other races that were not created in this way. However, pit bulls of 25 or 30 pounds won 60 pounds in Japan, and these dogs were created for fighting. Why is these American Pit Bull Terrier so advantage? The answer is not so clear, but I think it has something to do with the length of time the races were created for this purpose. Obviously, Pit Bull is the purest descendant of the old fighting dogs than other races. Of course, some people will be repulsed by the race exactly because of their vigorous pleasure in contact with the fight and their deadly efficiency in this. So be it. The breed is not for anyone. In fact, a pit bull owner should be a more responsible person than most other dog owners. One of the breed problems, terrier pit bull, is that while requiring the owner's responsibility, his attraction is very often for irresponsible people, but not always. Some famous people got involved with these dogs. But why would anyone want such a dog? Frequently asks usually for the fun of those who like us would like to know why anyone cares about any other kind. Perhaps a more valid or more perplexed point is because anyone would be interested in dog fights. The point is that very few pit bull owners are involved, but how to explain your interest? To see this from a more objective perspective, let's consider the horse race. Now we all know that the horse race is populated by a large number of obscure characters, however, there is no doubt that there are also many good people, too. Intelligent men, and women, are absolutely obsessed with possessing and creating horses of pure blood. Many of these people are captains of industries or are at the top of success in other fields, but their greatest passion is for these horses, and their greatest joys come from any good result they can. But why is this sports of kings so fascinating? Despite everything, the slower car easier is faster, and other animals some smaller than pure blood horses can run faster as well. But it doesn't hurt. We can all understand that fascination with such things is not irrational. Okay, let's consider the apparently irrational interest that many people have in arena dogs. First, fighting is a much more complex activity than simply running, with many variables and many complications. Then the APBT is the absolute champion in this area. Other animals of a comparable size have no chance. Also, because of great strength, agility and courage, the APBT is skilled in other things that is not struggle. As a prize, Pit Bull is smart, loving and has the most stable attitude of all dogs. There are several things where APBT is unique. Let's take just one as an example. A large number of pit bulls have the ability to climb trees. It seems that there are two explanations for this fact. First, the pit bulls are extremely stubborn, and if there is something on the tree they want they will go up. Second, the pit bulls use the front legs in the fight as a lever, as a free-fighting fighter wears their arms. This makes the front legs more like those of humans and capable of grabbing. All this, along with the characteristic force of the breed, allows many dogs to climb trees easily. Anyway, I think anyone with an open mind can see that there are many fascinating things about these animals. They are much more complex than running horses, and they are such a remarkable race that it is difficult to be satisfied with any other breed after having a pit bull. All of this is more remarkable when we consider that the breed gives more problem in creating than other races. They should remain separated from other dogs, and they are not especially beautiful, in the opinion of many people. In fact, my friend Professor Lutz, who has always created different races but is now a fan of Pit Bull, has appointed this dog the mutt with mumps because of his appearance. Nowadays I've always felt that the APBT gets on both sides. Some are very simple or ugly, others have different grace and elegance. It is probably natural to conclude that these pit bull lovers want an animal with a propensity for the fight, but they will not be satisfied with any other breed. This premise will be true for a few APBT owners, because most have no interest in the fighting aspect of these dogs. However, even this large number of pacifists will not condemn the fight of dogs, as the general public does, because they know their dogs so well that they can admit the simple fact that they let them fight have the same cruelty how to leave a bird fly. Regarding a small percentage of APBT owners who are interested in the aspect of the fight, the reader may think that the fights are yet complex and exciting, any interest generated will be minimized by the brutality involved. But once you know what you are seeing, a fight no longer gives brutality impression than a marathon or, better yet, the favorite sport of Americans, football. In any case, it is not my intention to convert the general public to dog struggle. But despite the fact that I am obviously a fan of Pit Bull, the endless product of the fight in Rhine, would be an incongruity, not to say absolute hypocrisy, for me to condemn her. My biggest concern is that if the fight is shown to be worse than it seems, the result is a general turmoil that will result in the creation of laws that will make it difficult to own Pit Bull. There are other pernicious effects of such legislation, and I will talk about it later. The purpose of this chapter is to show that pit bull is a truly unique race. Of course, all owners of all races think this about their own races, but in the case of APBT is true. This is the reason why people, good people, show a loyalty for this race despite everything. Surely there is no other race that requires so much devotion and courage. In addition, unusual devotion and responsibility for your dog, the pit bull owner must be resolute, because he will think that the attitude of the general public will be negative and often hostile. It doesn't help to know that these idiots don't know what they are talking about. You do not know if you will be happy or depressed to observe people who are conditioned by animal welfare groups and the media in general insisting that this attitude was their idea. Humanist groups teach the public through the media to react negatively regarding pit bull. Anyway, if you will have one of these iron dogs, you must have a little strength inside. Those who have will be rewarded many times by their dogs. And for the ignorant that can so boring, let's be patient and tolerant. Maybe with a little pity it will be good. It's not everyone who can enjoy a good APBT and enjoy. From that. Crawling the demon. Although the origins of the American Terrier pit bull are covered in the mists of time, my personal speculation is always reinforced when I take Judo out of his current. Although usually a calm dog, Judo has a real passion for fighting, and for this reason, when he is loose from the chain for any reason, usually for a walk, he throws himself at any dog barking at them. This, in turn, encourages other dogs to be absolutely crazy to try to catch it. During the turmoil, I can detect 2 or 3 voices, including Judo's. For those who did not hear the severe bark of a hunting dog persecution on the trail, because it is different from the kennel bark, their voices carry an almost agonizing ecstasy and yearning. Judo's voice will never be confused by that of the famous Buglean, but she has the same urgency and a delicious delirium as that of hunting dogs. Now, so that the reader does not draw their conclusions, I am not saying that the pit bulls and hunting dogs are ordinary descendants, perhaps thousands of years ago. Who knows when the mankind and the canines for the first time acted together in hunting? But it must have been thousands of years ago, and this was probably the first practical activity of the dogs used by the mankind. Hunting was a serious business then, but undoubtedly most men also enjoyed hunting, and the dogs who also liked it and would stand out in it were perpetuated. We are assuming, of course, that mankind knew nothing about selective creation in those days, but it is easy to imagine how the least enthusiastic and less skilled dogs could not participate in hunting piles and perhaps rejected or dead. This would be an indirect selective creation by separating the animals of less profit. The dogs helped in hunting, helping to crawl the hunt, then knock it down, and finally kill it. Eventually, specialization has evolved. In this way, dogs with longer muzzles and fallen pussy were more fit on the trails. Dogs with long legs and slender body were faster than the others, and they were more skilled at overthrowing the hunting once sighted. The strong, powerful dogs that were more profitable in the killing were not so fast but were nevertheless necessary since the hunt had been knocked down. In this way both man and canine developed an appetite to hunt. With the advent of crop and technology, hunting was no longer necessary and became recreational or a sport. Not all men or all dogs, for this reason, were more allowed to hunt. True hunting dogs were kept in kennels or chained when they were not hunting with their owners so they would not bleed their hunting or attack domestic creation. Lost dogs caught hunting were killed, and so they were the men. Men were called invaders if they fell on but were not part of the earth's people, and the penalty for invasion was often death. Was there a time when it was illegal for peasants to even have a hunting dog? Why would they want one to hunt, or rather, hunting? In any case, the peasants were allowed to keep small dogs that were used to repress uncomfortable animals such as rats, moles, and bad guys, and the dogs that did this were called terriers. Unfortunately for peasants, bulldogs were usually regarded as hunters, and their possession by peasants was prohibited. It is possible, even likely, that many of the small bulldogs were masked as a terrier so that their owners could keep them. This must be the origin of the name, pit terrier, that the Irish often used for their dogs, while everyone else referred to them as bulldogs. And then, too, it may be a track of why the pit dogs of the Irish were so small. In any case, it is easy to imagine how sports were developed by the use of these three types of hunting dogs and terriers. It's easy to see how hunters became interested to know which dog was the fastest, and thus the dog race was born. Several rusting evidence has evolved to track dogs and are used to this day. And it's not hard to see how curiosity developed about which was the most formidable of killers. In my opinion, the dog's fight against dogs originated much earlier in history than many people think. To demonstrate the efficient hunting connection of dogs, captive bears and bulls were used by what was called bears and bulls. Butchers later used these dogs to hold a bull chosen to be shot down. This practice, together with the bull sugar, apparently solidified the race with the name of bulldog. Prior to that they were known, in various languages, such as boar hunters, bear bulls, bulches, mastiffs, and, confined, dogs. Among the peasants, too, they had their hobby with their terriers. In this way, we hear about tea-chow, or retreating, and rat-killing competition. Since many peasants had a bulldog, and cross-breeding of bulldogs, disguised as a terrier, there are strong suspicions that the poor, too, surrendered to dog fights. Although people were generally interested in dogs for what they could do, they also enjoyed a good-looking dog, which was also good in their dexterity. The concept of a devotee about beauty was closely related to the function, so the perception of good looks tended to depend on the type of activity in which the dog was involved. One of the first groups to develop conformation patterns was the group of hunting dogs, and they began to show off their dogs, too. Thus there were now two categories, sports dogs and non-sports dogs, which meant hunting dogs for the first category and the rest fighting for the second. This system is still used today in the American Kennel Club conformation exhibitions, except that other categories have been added. Thus, we have divisions such as the toy group for the set of neck dogs, work dogs for dogs who do work on the farms or guard work and anything that can be related as work, and the hound group that includes Pharaoh and Vision that was developed for people who thought hunting dogs were quite special to have their own category. The system had its flaws, of course. One problem was that some races would fit more than one category. Our own breed, for example, would be a hunting dog, or hound, a work dog, such as a capture or guard dog, and even a terrier, since it was used to kill rat and badge. Just to mention two examples, Dachshund was mistakenly placed in the hound group, apparently because the classifiers thought the Hund, German dog, was translated into hound when it was actually dog. Terrier Boston is placed in the non-sports category, and I think this is a good place like any other since the race is certainly not a terrier. But then, why the designation terrier? System failures have resulted from a combination of ignorance by the people who employ the system and the resistance of many races being classified under one category. However, the system has worked well for the exhibitions for many years. The sad part is that the public is only informed about dog screenings and has obtained their information about them, directly or indirectly, through the sources of the American Kennel Club. In this way, false judgment and fantastic ideas about dogs abound, because the tide capital of exhibitors has been the adoption of ridiculous and non-substantiated stories about their races and the treatment of unregistered races in the American Kennel Club as if they did not exist. As someone who has been trying to investigate the history of our race, I can calculate how concept errors can be easily solidified in the official history of a race. Fortunately, I have the advantage of seeing any historical evidence that is available from the point of view of being familiar with pit bull in almost all of its aspects, arena dog, capture dog, hunting dog, guard dog, home dog, and so on. However, any student of any race must maintain an attitude of skepticism in all aspects of any history of race, including this, because the stories are gathered from various personal contacts, others written, which must have been borrowed from still other writings, illustrative work, old documents, and old artifacts. I am very upset about these stories that want to crawl a specific breed back to the ancient Egyptians. And yet, I can look at artifacts, or their photographs, of that time and see dogs that look a lot like ours and were used as ours may have been, too. However, I will never try to say that these dogs were our race, Pit Bull Egyptian Terriers, although I think it is perfectly logical to think that our dogs descend from this type of dog. But going back to more modern times, we have no means of knowing when the first imports of pit bulldogs were made, but my assumption will be that they came with the infamous who were threatening the whole of Europe with the Civil War and that they escaped or were brought here. This would have been before 1776, but of course this is pure speculation. We know from photographs that dogs were here before the Civil War, and of course, and the imports that were quite crowded with the Irish migrations resulting from the scarcity of the 1845 to 1851 potatoes are well known. In fact, what really happened was that one of the few Irish who became immediately economically successful in this country at that time or returned to their homeland and brought back the terrier's pit, or they were sent by their families who still lived there. Pit bulldog has always had an attraction to minorities, and I'm not quite right why. Most likely, the oppression and hard work are more bearable when you have a dog in your home, which you know can defeat any other dog in town. The fascination with the fight dog may be almost pathological at its intensity, but it can also be a balm for wounds and indignations suffered by an unfair society. In any case, since we know that pit bulldogs existed in several countries, it seems that other immigrants were the instrumental to bring dogs from their favorite races and various countries. The population was concentrated in the New England areas, New England, so at least in the beginning, dogs were found mainly there, too. But the owners of pit bulls are individualistic adventurers, the type that would venture to break up a spoiled region. In this way, the breed moved to the south and west. The breed has continued to be, and is still used to a multitude of activities, including fighting and hunting and as capture dogs, but of course the vast majority of people keep dogs as pets or guard dog. Pets owners usually knew an arena dog owners or, at least, arena dog breeders and were often scholars of the breed aspect. In other words, things were much more than they are today. Of each information, the indications are that the race was simply called bulldog by enthusiasts. However, when Chauncey Z. Bennett created the United Kennel Club in 1898, he recognized the races as American Terrier Pit Bull. The word American helped distinguish the breed from the Bull Terrier from exposure that was often nominated as Terrier Bull English. However, Bennett had a preference determined to use the word American to name his race. Thus, he had an American Fox Terrier, and a hunter of a type of raccoon from the United States, and an Old Glory Black and Tan, and later, the Spitz, long muzzle breed, made the American Eskimo. For a while, he also registered white collectors such as Columbian collections. Columbia was another word used for America that was most common in the old days, as in the song, Columbia, Gem of the Ocean, Ocean Jewel. Bennett was not necessarily an ultranationalist, but people thought ours was a special country, and they thus accepted anything new or doubtful if it had American in front. Bennett's reasoning was that if a breed was developed or changed slightly in this country, then it could be called Americana. For a long time later, there has been a debate on whether the breed should be called Pit Bull Terrier to emphasize the acceptance of arena dogs or American Terrier Bull to promote the breed. Terrier Bull with the pit in parentheses was Bennett's solution. When the American Kennel Club was petitioned to recognize the breed around 1935, the name Terrier Pit Bull American, or American Bull, could be used because of the influence of Bull Terrier owners who felt that they should have the patent of the name Bull Terrier. The owners of the Boston Terrier who wanted to recognize the Bull Terrier Boston were despised for the same reason. Another factor was that AKC, American Kennel Club, I didn't want to use a name that had been used by UKC, United Kennel Club. Will Judy was the promoter and editor of the Dog World, at that time, suggested the name Terrier Yankee. In any case, Staffordshire Terrier was the name decided, and the race was placed in the Terrier group, which is a strangely out-of-purpose place. The English version of his arena dog was recognized by the British Kennel Club as the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Apparently, the creators of Bull Terrier there were more reasonable or less influential. For many years, people have considered Staffordshire Terrier, Staff or Staff, and Staffordshire Bull Terrier, Stafford, as the same breed, even if they developed together totally different strains and had different patterns. In the midst of exhibitors, there has always been a fascination by imported lineage. Thus, in the 1950s, some staff possesses imported Staffordshire Bull Terriers and crossed it with their Stairs. Well, this certainly caused a civil war with the staff circle, as many of them would not accept Staffords as the same race. Howard Hadley, one of the most respectable and influential staff owner, led a successful fight to get the Staffordshire Bull Terrier to be declared as a race separated by AKC. One problem then arose because the record had two races with very similar names, Staffordshire Terrier and Staffordshire Bull Terrier. At this point, staff owners, who fought so hard by the name American Bull Terrier so long ago, had the offer of having this name withdrawn, but they refused. The reason was that they spent more than 20 years and thousands of dollars promoting the name Staffordshire, and they were now reluctant to give up. This made no sense, of course, because the staff had never become popular, and most people had no idea what they were. Anyway, the name American Staffordshire Terrier was chosen as a commitment, and the last thing I heard is still the name being used. In the meantime, a registry office to register exclusively pit bulldogs was founded by Guy McCord in Chicago. He was called the American Dog Breeders Association, American Dog Bedurters Association, and he recorded the race as Pit Bull Terriers. Later the registry office was assumed by Frank Ferris, who had married John P. Colby's widow. In the 1970s, the registry was acquired by the Greenwood family, and at this time, the American Pit Bull, without parentheses, was the official name for the American Dog Breeders Association, ADBA, breed. Under the direction of Ralph Greenwood, the registry office grew tremendously in size and influence. Before that, ADBA was simply that other organization that records pit bulls. Pit bulls' popularity grew and declined like all races, but it was always less popular than the races at the height of the exhibitions, because it was much less exposed than the others. Another obstacle was that in the past, the people who kept dogs as a pet made them loose, as it was considered cruel to confine them. A pit bull, however, had to be confined, arrested in a surroundings, a kennel, or arrested by the chain, definitely inconvenient in those days. However, the breed kept supporters with the general public, although it was not a large group. I remember Bob Wallace once complained about how people asked him if one of his award-winning pit bulls he was taking to a walk was part boxer. Well, one of the reasons that made Bob so furious was that the boxers were a relatively new race for him. Despite everything, they only became popular in this country after World War II, while pit bull was the formidable old race to Bob. But I bet Bob would like to go back to the days when the race was virtually a secret rather than a non-official scapegoat of the humanists. Apart from being kept as pet dogs and guard dogs, dogs were also used as hunting dogs, usually as silent, but occasionally, but very rarely, pit bull would bark on the trail, lineage dogs, usually as capture dogs, but a surprising number like versatile dogs on farms, and of course as arena dogs. The activity in the arena was much more exuberant in all districts of the country, but each district lived in one world. A specialized magazine, such as Dog Fancy, Dog Breeders, Pit and Pal, or Pit Dogs, would occasionally prosper or eventually come out of circulation. Bloodlines Journal, published by the United Kennel Club, was a constant source of information, but it contained fighting reports only from the southern arenas. Photographies of body dog action appeared very rarely in this magazine, and during the 1950s, the reports were completely interrupted. A variety of rules were used for competitions, see Appendix A, but in the 1950s, Gabon Trahan and Floyd Burroughs came together to write what became known as the Cashew Rules, Cajun Rules. Similar rules were written by Al Brown, but they were not widely used. In fact, there is a rumor that some West winners have made new rules, calling them Cajun Rules, thinking they could be better accepted in this way, and sent them to several key men. There were three main blows to the rules of Cajun, which would be: 1. Emphasis was placed in the hands of the coach being positioned in front of the shoulders, the dog ready for the scratch. 2. A return was more liberally defined as a dog simply turning his head and shoulders away from his opponent without worrying about whether or not it was a loss of interest in the fight. Even a maneuver that resulted in the momentary return of head and shoulders was called a return. 3. An out of the day count ranging from 10 seconds to 2 minutes could start with one scratch at a time, and the dog that was losing to start. The biggest impact of Cajun's rules was to shorten competitions and thus greatly increase the chances of preventing the loss of life of one of the dogs. In the early 1950s, I.Q. Kennedy founded a magazine called Pit Dogs. It caused a general turmoil among pit bull creators in general, while journal bloodlines became more and more shy to support the race and almost never mentioned the struggles. Now, there was a magazine that not only published the competitions but also showed her photographs. The magazine was successful and was later assumed by Pete Sparks. Although intelligently made and full of information, the magazine, whose title was changed by Sparks for Your Friend and Mine, His Friend and Mine, was certainly counterproductive for arena dog activity because he focused on public attention about her. More appropriately, I must say that she attracted the attention of the humanists, and they used it as a red flag to play in the face of their constituents. Soon arena dog conventions were broken by several agencies regularly. For a while, Cuba was the perfect place for conventions, but Castro's inauguration ended with it. Arena dog breeders have learned to be a little more reserved about their activities. In any case, the magazine continued, as well as public pressure. In the early 70s Your Friend and Mine interrupted its publication, but other magazines came out. For this reason, public pressure continued, and in the late 1970s, the stupid proliferation of intentional crime laws began throughout the country. Throughout this time, the breed has gained unprecedented popularity in the middle of the general public. The reasons probably varied. One was that since controlled laws became existing through the country, the pit bulls were no longer a special problem like a pet dog. Another was the reaction of the general public to increase residence robberies. Many citizens have obtained guard dogs, and pit bull has always had a good reputation like a firm guard dog, although they don't bark much and like people, even strangers. If nothing more, anyway, your appearance is an impediment. I think, however, that even the most sweet of pit bulls would not be stopped if its owner was physically attacked, and I cannot think of any other breed that I would like to have by my side. Finally, all the advertising generated on dogs by humanists may have resulted in funds for their coffers, but also engendered interest in race, and as always in the wrong person for the wrong reasons. With this huge contingent of pit bull creators who like people, organizations began to be formed. One of the first was the Golden State Pit Bull Club in Southern California. In 1975, they asked United Kennel Club to sponsor a pit bull terrier exhibition. When this agency objected, the group approached the American Dog Breeders Association, and they agreed to sanction for conformation exhibitions. First, a standard was necessary, and ADBA was establishing one in a very well-organized way, looking at photographs of dogs known for being good arena dogs and analyzing them carefully. Other aspects, such as strong bite and intelligence, were not considered because there were no aspects of compliance in these peculiarities. Anyway, these exhibitions have become very popular and now the American Dog Breeders Association has subsidiaries throughout the country. While most participants are merely interested in conformation, it has been fun to see the arena dog's creator also take part in it and get involved in them. Recently, heavyware, such as sled dogs, has become a popular component in conformation competitions, and many bulldogs broke the record of sled handle. Some may be concerned that exhibitions will lead to breed deterioration. Today are the competitors following the same trail that staff creators have followed many years back. Well, there is a difference determined in today's attitudes. The devotees of the original staff, just like today's competitors, were amalgam by pit, or retired pit creators of pit creators, and simply breeders of the breed. In any case, the conduct taken was entirely different. It was decided, partly by the pressure from the American Kennel Club, to completely disapprove of dog struggle and to talk badly about it clamorously and persistently. All of this has been designed to increase public acceptance of breed and throw out the superstition of staff devotees. No goal has been achieved. Even today the audience swallows staff creators were pit creators, because another reason they would want dogs, and the conservators of staff approached the breed never did much to promote it. The American Association of Dog Breeders today shows the dog affairs, reciprocally, respecting a good hunting dog. They are fascinated by the history of the pit dog and would not even consider the creation of a dog simply because it has a good conformation. Better, their interests are in the perpetuation of the essence of the race, not just a similar. In hands like these, the race is well served. Does any crazy politician in San Francisco want to ban the race? Before the proposal comes before the supervisor framework, these people mobilize the opposition to include even humanimaniacs. Put a law against the race in Hollywood, Florida. Okay, but be prepared to be stuck in a civil process by these people in which they ordered a battalion of connoisseurs, some of them biologists and doctors who have pit bulls. Although these things are an expensive enterprise, they serve as warnings to other demagogues that bring panic to the public and, alcavate votes, come with various discriminatory laws against the American pit bull breed. They will, however, be pointed out as responsible in the final analysis for the unnecessary expenses they claim in their constituents for arbitrariness and unoccupied minds pushing for legislation, and thus unconstitutional, discriminatory. I have referred to these last few years as the era when the creators of the American pit bull have been tested. While they were difficult times and discouraging times, it was also one of the unions among the less serious devout owners. The breed will probably be in better situation for it. One of the beneficial effects I noticed is that he has what was called before natural enemies working together. Thus, pit dog creators, ADBA people, UKC people, staff creators, Stafford creators, and even bull terrier creators are working side by side on certain projects, truly a vision to heat the valve of an old cynical heart valve. The natural history of the absurdity groups of humanist society in animal control are, for the general public, the same thing. In fact, it is not that simple. There are several groups for the welfare of the animal, and there are different organizational services for animal control operations, too. The easiest way to keep these groups somewhat separate is to remember that the goal of animal welfare groups is to protect animals from people, while the goal of animal control is to protect the audience from animals and their troubles. Generally, animal control is funded by the municipality or city, while the various human groups depend on particular donations. With so many groups for the well-being of the animal, it is impossible to name them all, but I thought I would spend my time on choosing some of them for you. According to news, the first organization for the well-being of the animal was the Royal Society, for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, created in Brittany in 1824 by Reverend Arthur Boone. Later, in 1866, the American Society for Preventing Animal Cruelty was created in New York. Obviously, there was enough money entering, while the American Humanist Association was founded around 1870. A new organization called the National Humanist Association was promptly sued by the American Humanist Association for the similarity of the name, so the name was changed to the United States Humanist Society. There are many other groups for the well-being of the animal, too, but to outline them all will be an unnecessary tedious exercise. When I was a boy in the Colorado, there was a portrait of a very painted fat woman who used to ride her horse in front of our house every day. In exactly what capacity, I'm not right, but it was linked in some way with local humanist society. One of the reasons I remember this is because the joke of the moment was that there was no one more cruel to the animals than she went to her horse exactly for riding it. The situation of the city with humanist society was one of these instances in which the difference between humanist society and the animal control society were considerably tumultuous by the fact that humanist society was commissioned to direct animal transport and control service. In fact, the kennels of humanist society were still rented to the public as dogs for dogs. Although animal control services are sometimes hired by human groups, they are usually separated. In fact, different human groups have taken animal control organizations to the courts for cruelty to them. To be honest, great juries also indicated humanist societies for the same accusation. Sometimes different groups by the animal's welfare are harassed, accusing each other of cruelty, usually with respect to the shelter keeping the animals cornered or the euthanasia method used. Now, admitting that human groups have more than their quotas in the chips, we must also recognize that many decent and sincere people are involved in the movement. Although we think about the creators of Bull Terrier imprisoned in mortal combat with humanists, this is not always the case. For example, Bloodline's Journal, in his old days in favor of the dog fight, fought with his arms with the humanist groups against the vivisectorists. Cynic, I suppose, they will conclude that pit bull creators were merely trying to help their image. The truth, however, that pit bull breeders are no less animal lovers than humanists. In any case, humanistic societies have generally done tremendous work with the image. In fact, the impression with the general public is that they are a government agency. Of course, they had easy work on this because they had everything for them. After all, almost everyone loved the animals and are against cruelty to them. However, were the humanist groups really so good and so effective? I have my doubts. And I am very concerned about your general trends to favor extremely oppressive legislation. I also have the fact that they ignore the condition of wildlife whose habitat is being constantly destroyed by the population of the good old Homo sapiens. Humanist groups are rightly a state in front of the defense of domestic animal sterilization to reduce the explosion of the population. If they are interested in all animals, for example, wildlife, should they not keep the human population under control either? Although I feel that there should be general laws anti-cruel, I have some sincere doubts about how effective the legislation has about animal cruelty. After all, the most common cruelty is simply neglect, and few people come. In any case, the most effective force for anti-cruel is by pressure, and I think people have always been concerned with animals and have used various persuasion measures so that their friends take care of their animals. This attitude of respect and care by animals is reflected even in old writings. Anyway, certain things seem to have an impetus about themselves. Legislation does not eliminate, or even have little effect on cruelty, and humanistic societies have only been able to have legislation against the sports of ordinary or little-known men. They have been uniquely ineffective against any cruelty that has to do with fattening our stomachs. Readers may be interested in the sociological circumstances that accompanied the growth of humanist groups and the subsequent legislation that resulted. Do you remember that it was the Reverend Boone who founded the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Royal Society for Animal Cruelty Prevention? Well, the church was antagonistic to the many animal sports but not always for the reason you can imagine. This was during an era of support of the denial of the pleasures of this world. In this way, animal sports were antagonized more for the pleasure given to viewers than for any presumed suffering on the part of the animals. This denial for worldly pleasure has penetrated many religions of the time, and some clerks were scandalized when the secret of their chess games were discovered. Henry Bergh, who founded the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the United States, was differently described as a cushion and a pharmacist. He put on polaines and a top hat, and he was obviously sincere about the cruelty of animals. However, he did not stop eating meat because of the custom, but he at least put pressure on a more human slaughter. His compassion had its limits, since he went to Pelourinho for those who were cruel to animals. He was also in favor of the death penalty. Based on New York, he traveled extensively across the country, conferences and leaving SPCA. My first memory of information about one of the humanist societies was when I was 14, and the information was about a dog arena that was allegedly invaded by police in New York City. According to the news, a number of sophisticated New Yorkers were participating in the event, and not only were they taken by surprise and ashamed for a night in jail, but they were also nauseated by the vision of a slowly bull chewing the leg other. Well, even at this young age, I knew enough about the pit bulls and their fights to know that this story was quite unusual and it could not be true. The legs are surprisingly solid, and besides, a dog would not allow his opponent to stay in his leg for so long, usually throwing her biting her muzzle. I would later learn that veracity in these reports of humanitarian entities was at least questionable. Incidentally, the article was illustrated by the photograph of a white bull terrier of the American Kennel Club. My next revelation was from a praised magazine of a movie to be screened about dog fight in which he starred in Joe E. Brown. I don't remember the name of the movie, but the magazine warned that the owners of arena dogs wouldn't like it because it revealed the so-called sport for what it really was. At the time, I worked in a cinema as an indicator of place and doorman after class, so I saw this pompous film several times. The movie was so nauseating and deceiving that I will save the reader of the plot, but he involved a fighting dog coach and a particular arena dog. Just to show you how authentic the movie was, the arena dog was a boxer. And the arena dog coach training method was to whip the dog with a whip, to make it fierce. The movie was absolutely strange without any affinity for the real world, but he was obviously the kind of thing about which humanist society had no reserve to applaud for its authenticity. The real garbage on pit dog activities began to take off in the early 70s. That's when stories using puppies and kittens like baits to train an arena dog began to appear. All the other nonsense about prostitution, drugs, and violence that were part of the arena dog scenario gained new prominent coverage over this time, too. Why such a lie? Can't an honest argument be made against dog struggle actually based on? The big question for me was, where did the stories start? Were they a product of the imagination of any humanist too active? To be honest, and I'm always being partial to see the other side of the point of view, a Chicago reporter supposedly got an interview with an alleged dog fight promoter who spoke of the use of kittens in onions bags like bait to fight dogs. He even talked about cutting off his kittens so that they wouldn't hurt or discourage the arena dogs. You have to know these dogs to evaluate how ridiculous this story is. Here you have dogs that will kill a porcupine, absolutely disdaining the thorn, and yet we have to cut the nails of the kitten so that dogs are not frightened to attack them. At this point, I will divide only for a moment to talk about the characteristics of pit bulls that make the history of puppies of dogs and kittens as more absurd baits. A friend of mine once created different types of mastim but converted to pit bull, but he retained a favorite mastim. Over the pass of several years, he had had 3 or 4 loose bulldogs, and each time they passed precisely through other pit bulls to grab and mistreat mastim. Since he was not understanding what was happening, I explained to him that since mastim was so huge brute, he represented a super stimulus that the bulldogs could not resist. Because it is true that some bulldogs will kill puppies of dogs and kittens, and so will dogs of other races, most of them will not. I was in more than one kennel of breeders in which puppies were allowed to run loose and where they ran from side to the reach of the champions who merely played with them or tolerated them for their abuses rancorously. This is because most pit bulldogs are stimulated by larger dogs and other animals. Now, to be honest, many bulldogs will go after anything that is not human, this is exactly their old hunter heritage, but if any animal has immunity, they will have the puppies of dogs and kittens. One night I was talking to a legitimate dog breeder who told me that he would have nothing to do with a dog that killed puppies of dogs or kittens, as he considered it as a weakness, even a symptom of cowardice. In most cases, I fear, our humanists invented their own stories of fear or, better, they used isolated examples and sounded as if they were representatives of all competitions. This does not seem to be typical of the humanists of trying to be certain that their stories were true. The absurdity about prostitution and drugs was obviously a cynical attempt to induce law officers to take dog fights more seriously. The truth on the subject is that traffickers and prostitutes are no longer part of the dog's scenery than they would be in a baseball match. This does not mean that no prostitutes or traffickers have never been present in a dog competition, or in a baseball alloy, but it is not certainly representative. Anyway, armed with their stories of dog theft, puppies, and kittens for training arena dogs, along with the stories of prostitution and drugs, and even more ridiculous stories about such things as the use of shock apparatus to provoke dogs to fight and destroy dogs whose manipulators characteristically would not even shot them out of mercy with a shot on their head. The humanist groups were able to force a law making the dog fight a crime in California. Later they followed what I call proliferation of absurd crimes in several states. In each case, the approach was the same story we told earlier was told, which was added that certain states had very effective laws. This was wrong information because severe is not necessarily the same as effective. Each state was assured that it was the center of the dog fight in America, and wasn't that a shameful honor? Much controversy in the media preceded any attempt at legislation. In some states, penalties of more than 10 years in prison were established. Shadows of Henry Bergh and his pillory. One thing all laws have in common, however, they were all equally useless. There are few people I know who love animals and are more dedicated to them than I am. My wife would be one of them, and my father's wife, my stepmother, would be another one I could think suddenly. If I am such a sentimental animal lover, I must be able to communicate more or less at the same level with humanists, but somehow I doubt this is possible. If this were possible, and the humanists would be equally goodwill and would make the same effort I make to see the point of view on the other side, I would like to point out that their efforts have been greatly against productive if they have the well-being of arena dogs in mind. Even if they are thinking of other animals and do not care about our dogs, their absurd story supplies have been harmful to them, as well as their bait stories have inspired certain low-level newly arrived for the breed to enter this type of thing. Their stories, however, become a self-fulfilling to a certain point. If humanist groups are really interested in the well-being of dogs, they should work towards the legalization and regulation of dog fights. In this way they can make a contribution toward breeding the welfare of animals instead of getting it worse, as they did in the past, with their efforts to stop it, but they will never stop, so because not making it better to the welfare of the animal. More fishermen. Believe it or not, I regularly receive a consistent flow of correspondence from all over the world, praising my books. I'm enough people to feel pleasure for any generous compliment on my books, feeding my ego, and making me feel that I did right thing for the dogs. I love writing the books. Unfortunately, there are times when I had my doubts about it. A substantial number of senders and the people I say that the favorite part of the books has been the chapters in which I report stories I heard about the individuality of races. Apparently, the nature and personality of dogs shine more in the stories than in all my pontifications in other sections of the book. Well, I like stories, too, and I am pleased to introduce a few more. There may be fisherman stories, and they certainly seem like this, especially for someone who doesn't know these dogs that well, but unbelieving by nature as I am inclined to believe in them. A point of view. One of the many annoyances that the American pit bull owners should stand is the people who inevitably knock on their door, wanting to borrow their dog. Since no one in their right mind will let your dog get involved in a feud without being present to supervise and separate the dog, this means lending both the owner and the dog. Usually the situation is that a certain dog has been so threatening the neighborhood or biting children, and an irresponsible owner is completely undisciplined about his pet's control. Your friend does not want the responsibility of having a bulldog, but he would certainly like to take advantage of him only on this occasion. In almost every case, it is best to be polite but firmly decline the use of your dog. Very little good can happen, and a very bad is always a possibility. But the flesh is weak, and so the mind. Consequently, most of us succumb to the wishes of a good friend at least one occasion. This happened to Maury Rootberg when Booger, janitor of Going Light Barney, was 8 years old. It seems that an upper-class arrogant member was used to taking his retriever Chesapeake Bay to an empty lot around the city to exercise it. If a lost dog passed by, a break was given for him to mistreat or kill the unfortunate animal. Unlike the other hunting dog owners, this person was very proud of his dog's fighting skills. Strangely, one of Chesapeake's ancestors today had the reputation of never having lost a duck or a fight. This giant dog, according to rumors, killed a number of dogs, both small and large, and the victim's owners tried to convince Maury to take Booger to the field and leave it loose. For Maury's credit, he resisted the idea for a while, but with the increase in the registration of mutilations, he finally gave way. Accompanied by 2 of the other dog owners, Maury took Booger to the lot, and certainly, there was the owner of Chesapeake with his boots, hat, whistle, and a whip, working on his dog. Maury diminished her car until she stopped and opened the door. Booger had already seen his victim. It was later noticed that the only bruises on Booger were the soles of his feet in living flesh. He made quickly leaving the car to attack the victim as soon as possible. Like a guided missile, Booger launched himself in front of Chesapeake, but he was so silent that only at the last minute the great dog was aware of his approach. The Chesapeake turned with delight, opened his mouth to grasp the visitor, if reckless. Booger flew directly to those huge gaping jaws, as if he were going straight down. Flatlessly Booger launched under his gigantic opponent and out of sight. Chesapeake's head moved down as Booger slid under him. Now, from the point of view of Chesapeake's owner, some small dog was stupid enough to go straight to the destruction. The owner was unable to hide his pride and satisfaction. The huge rust body hid Booger completely. No sound came from both dogs, and Chesapeake's head, apparently holding his opponent, occasionally shook or spinning. The owner went to Maury, giving light blows with his whip with satisfaction. "Sir," he said, "you just lost your dog." Without saying anything, Maury was studying the situation for a few more moments. Then he walked and looked under the retriever. There was Booger, the forelegs embraced against the giant body that was on him. He was clinging to that huge jaw and pulled her so widely open that the Chesapeake could not sound. With bright eyes, Booger shook his prey for a few seconds, causing his head to move from side to side. Blood from Retriever's mouth was dripping from his mouth from the sides of Booger's head. "Look from here," Maury said calmly. "It is amazing what a different perspective can do from a person's point of view." Suddenly, the owner of Chesapeake, who had previously been so affected and arrogantly happy, was now apoplectic, threatening and sending Maury to push his killer away from his dog. And this was one of those rare instances in which it was worth the agitation to stir a bulldog against another breed. The owner of Chesapeake tasted what it was like to be from the other side of a pet being beaten. He lost his dog's pride, posed pride, and perhaps gained some compassion. "And your dog never assaulted other dogs, regardless of size. Perhaps he has had enough fights. Most likely, he frightened by running after another dog as a Booger. The fight dog lover and the dog lover. Not all dog breeders are angels, of course, but I was blessed to know some of the most decent and honorable, and they compare themselves in favor of knowledge about the dog and compassion with any creator. Of course, Wallace was mainly concerned about the perpetuation of dog lineage and only mounted a dog occasionally to test the value of his breed against others. However, he referred to himself as a dog fight lover, and he lived at a time when a person could somehow be more open about the activity of an arena dog than today. When he was young in midfields, Wallace was a bird hunter enthusiast, and one of his companions in these hunts was the municipal judge. In fact, they often used the judge's dog, a crack, in their raids. Occasionally, conversations would revolve around the bulldogs and inevitably evoke the same response as the judge: "Bob, I just don't understand how you can put these dogs to fight. I'm a lover of them, I can't understand such a thing. There is nothing I love more than a dog." Bob, without the gift of infinite patience, would swallow his anger and try to explain the competition of arena dogs, that even a dog lover can participate, but not a practitioner. Like so many other people, the judge's mind was not open to new or different ideas. Despite the false criticism of the judge, the friendship between the two men resisted and they remained hunting companions. One day the judge appeared with a new dog for hunting, and naturally Bob asked about the old one. "Oh, old Jack was getting too old to hunt, so I gave it." When Bob asked who had been with the dog, the judge replied that he did not know the person's name, it was only someone he had met on the street. This inflamed Wallace considerably, but at least for a while, he said nothing. However, the next time his friends started chattering about Bob to take his dogs to fight, and as he was a dog lover could not understand that, Wallace exploded. "Yes, you are a dog lover, that's fine," said Wallace in a tone of voice that shook the trees. His natural tone was low, anyway, low in tone and unintentionally. Here Jack has spent all these years bravely working as much work for you, your signal and called, and slave to your whims. And how do you pay it in exchange for this love? When he gets old to hunt above his expectations, you discard it like an old shoe. And you didn't even care about finding a good home for him. No, you just gave it to some stranger, and you have no idea what kind of treatment he's having. Well, if this is being a dog lover, I'm happy to be a fighting dog sponsor. Perplex was the judge with the censorship of Wallace that he spent many weeks trying to locate his old dog. And he never said something about Bob being a fighting dog sponsor. Jako and Lion. One of my favorite stories of all time was those that were told for me by two businessmen in Boulder, Colorado, when I was around my 14 years and I just couldn't help hear enough about the pit bull terrier American. One of the two men owned a restaurant called Howard's Steakhouse, and he had been a professional boxer in his youth. His career recorded only 2 losses, both by decision of points. One was a fight for the world title half a medium weight and the other went to the average weight crown. The other man owned many properties, including a tea and coffee company in which I worked later. My biggest pleasure was to gather these two and hear them tell stories of dogs from the past. I mentioned Jako before. He was a small 14-pound dog, small but indestructible and hard as stone. At the time of this story, Jako was in the power of Ed, the owner of the properties, who kept him stuck in a stake with a cable mounted on his luxurious house. Later, within Jako's domain, Lion was brought, a large 30-pound pit bulldog pit with a color that gave rise to his name. His physique was also that of a lion, with his big head and a strong neck, not to mention his huge size. Lion was trapped in a rolled-up 60 meters away from Jako, who was casually looking around to find a way to let go so he could emerge this fiery newly arrived. You understand, Jako was just like most bulldogs in what he felt he could hit anything regardless of the size, even a lion. Just in Jako's case, were you not sure if he could? Well, Jako never found a way to let go of the chain, but he was occasionally taken into the house, and that's where he somehow made his escape. No one was sure of what happened. He was left alone in a room on the 3rd floor and the door was locked safely. The 17 daughter was the one who discovered that Jako had escaped from the room. She also noted, terrified, that the window was open. Certainly the dog would not have enough intelligence to jump the window of that time. In the case of Jako you never knew, of course, and the girl looked at the grass below, hoping to see a broken body. Nothing. At that time Ed joined his daughter and he learned of Jako's disappearance. He, too, looked down confused. No told body broken on the floor. There was a tree outside the window, but there was no dog in it. However, Ed sism, could it be possible that the dog jumped to the tree branch, then climbed a branch to the roof? Once on the roof, the dog could merely follow the slope and go down to the porch roof, and jump to the floor safely. Well, if Jako managed to reach the floor, he probably went straight behind Lion. So he could likely have jumped out of the 3 floors, since his death would be the same inevitable way. When Ed and his daughter arrived at the backyard, they stopped involuntarily in a big surprise. There he was Lion, with his chain wrapped around him like a cocoon, being dragged everywhere by Jako who had it by the muzzle and completely without action, with the help of the current. Jako looked at them and shook his tail when he gave another crowd on Lion's huge head, then a shake. Jako, as always, was without a scratch. Jako attacks again. In retrospect, it is difficult to separate the chaff from the wheat from the stories I hear about Jako. Some of them simply seem to be impossible. The same people who told the stories about Jako had others about Denver, Lion and other dogs that looked more likely, but they increased the most eloquent and laughed as they could when they talked about Jako. Apparently, he was something special, an absolute dynamo, intelligent, playful, talented, full of personality, and absolutely devoid of conscience. He had a real propensity to cause problems for his owners and making them difficult. An example of this was the time Ed began to leave his son Jimmy 14 to take Jako for tours. Things went well for a while, but one day an Airedale Terrier dog managed to get into Jako's reach that without ceremony arrested his muzzle like a bear trap. The screams of the terrier could be heard at a distance, and Jimmy was having a huge job to leave Jako free. A crowd soon graduated, and each person had their own system to separate a dog fight. Water was thrown over the dogs, a match was lit under the Jako tail, and a track was lit under the dogs, all to no avail, as Jako held firmly, and the screams of the terrier increased in a growing. Finally, the terrier managed to escape and disappeared, running toward the horizon. Now this little episode has created a lot of talk in the city, because the terriers Airedale were considered hard dogs, and one was attacked by a half-sized dog has become a topic for the small town in conversations that were worth it. Unfortunately, Ed, as a businessman, did not want to talk, so he had a muzzle to Jako he used from this day on during the walks with Jimmy. Things went well for some time later, and Jako enjoyed the tours even if he had to tolerate the muzzle. But one day a giant, apparently descendant mutt of Terra Nova, led to the appearance of Whale and without ceremony advanced on him. The giant dog caught his helpless and almost suffocated opponent. Of course, Jako was completely calm. So, if he was gagged, he was exactly happy to be in a fight. Grabbing what he could from his opponent's body with his powerful front paws, he pushed the muzzle to his neck. The most he could have was the little bites, a little skin and a tuft of hair, but he held firmly and worked on that small tightening with all the enthusiasm he would have if he were really doing something. The big dog, in the meantime, was losing something of his enthusiasm after about 5 minutes giving his best blows to the little helpless dog, just to have an exultant Jako in everything he had given and asking for more. When the great dog's confidence gave way, his tail was between his legs. He walked away a little, undecided on what to do, and doing him, Jako hugged him the strongest with his front paws and buried his head with the muzzle in his neck, looking at everyone as if muttering in his ear, perhaps telling him what he was about to do with him. The giant animal turned and ran through the city as fast as he could, with his short opponent gagged in heated persecution. You can imagine how it seemed in the eyes of the city's population. Here Jako 2 months earlier a Valenteo Terrier Airedale twice his size rang, now he obviously has surrounded a dog 3 times larger than its size, and did it with a gag. Half an hour later, Ed, working at the store quietly, was surprised when a customer entered the store exclaiming, "Ed, you will never believe what I just saw on the street." Dusty and the German Shepherd readers should remember Dusty from my first book, appearing in the Extravagant Stories section, and a photograph of him appeared in the second book. He belonged to a man I referred to as Peel the Stuffer. In this story, Pete recorded Dusty to have some idea of his courage, since it was his desire to procreate the dog, I was very fond of him. Well, if there is anything cruel in the dog fight, it's the recovery period later, and poor old Dusty was really hurt. It was the day after the fight was very cold outside, the floor was covered with snow, and poor old Dusty could barely walk. Peter usually would put Dusty on the collar before taking him for a walk, because it was usual in those days for people to leave their dogs loose, but what was the need to put the collar on poor Dusty that was in a state of pity that he could barely walk? When they left, Pete and Dusty continued with turtle steps the steps to the backyard. Each step was a bigger obstacle to Dusty that had the injured and raised front paw and was staggering with both of them. Finally, Pete took Dusty on his lap carefully and carried him down through the steps. So concentrated was Pete to kindly put his dog on the floor that he did not repair the German Shepherd in the alley behind the charcoal ashes. But Dusty saw. As soon as his paws touched the floor, he ran like a rocket directly toward the strange dog that had the shameless of being alive and breathing, and on his terrain, too. Now Dusty was a small dog, and the pastor was unusual a large dog. The big dog got up and consequently struck Dusty as if he were a fly. Pete retreated to see the little dog fall in front of him, the same small dog that only a moment before was so hard and painful to move. But as soon as Pete extended to grab Dusty, his arms closed in the air, because Dusty recovered his paws, he bought against the pastor. This time he managed to penetrate the thick by the ear, but the big dog shook him out and again knocked him on a somersault toward Pete. Dusty was back in a second and, simulating attacking his head, he grabbed a front paw. The small dog became indistinct when he shook his prey, and the big dog ran into a chrysal and pain. At this moment Pete could see the need for a sturdy stick and ran to get one. When he returned, he found that Dusty had put the big dog lying on his back. Holding him by the ear, Dusty dragged the pastor in a circle. When Pete released Dusty with the stick, it was his opponent twice more his size that laid away. Pete put his collar in Dusty, who continued to spokes like a puppy. After taking over the business, he then rushed the steps he had to be charged 5 minutes earlier. Moral: never trust that a bulldog will not fight, regardless of its condition. Babe and the biologists have noted that the smartest of animals are more likely to participate in play activities. Thus, while the most primitive of animals are basically eating and breeding, with any reserve time to spend in free time, for example, sleeping, the most efficient and intelligent of animals is most likely to deliver play. In fact, the greatest advances in the wealth of Homo sapiens see as a joke bioproduct, because science was originally strictly recreational and was certainly not treated with respect, simply being an experiment to satisfy mere curiosity at Toa. Well, anyway, it is certainly true that play is everything except unaware of invertebrates, fish, amphibians, but in birds and mammals, particularly the last one, we begin to notice an increase in incidence of play activities, especially in species usually considered as intelligent. And more surely dogs are an example of playful and intelligent animals. Some individuals, including one of the best-known dog coaches, will contest the idea that dogs are intelligent. In fact, they think it is an abuse of the term when applied to any animal other than humans. Well, maybe yes, but ethnologists, those scientists who have studied animal behavior to the maximum, have no doubt in referring to even some of the lowest animals as relatively intelligent. I think it is possible to go to the extreme in two directions. For example, the general public attributes to dogs an almost human intelligence and motivation, while, contrary to certain coaches, after years of experience, they can think of dogs as merely automatons guided by inherited instincts and any training that has been imposed on them by humans. No vision will be correct from the vision of most ethnologists. Now, if pit bulldogs are extraordinarily intelligent dogs, a concept that my observations tend to support, then it follows that they may be more inclined to games. And well, they seem to be. Not only are they more playful than most dogs, but they are also more serious about their games, almost as bad as humans in this regard. That is, they will go through great distances to invent games and will pursue with extraordinary vigor. Give it a puppy a stick for him to catch and play, and as it grows, it catches logs. A pit bull puppy can start by playing with bicycle tires and ending up truck tires. Some examples will help illustrate the goal later. Many years ago, a man took his pit bull puppy to the sea to swim. As soon as Norton, the puppy, grew, his frequent trips to the sea, and his enthusiasm for him allowed him to become an excellent swimmer, unsurpassed even in water dog competitions I saw in action. When Norton was grown, he was an absolute wonder to look on the coast. It will jump into the sea, bite the white wave foam, and will soon exceed the crash line. So just to change the course of fun, it will toll tirelessly as if he was looking for fishing sharks. I don't know how long he was able to stay there, but his owner always had to call him. I kept looking at him one day for 40-5 minutes, his head a mere spot in the distant waters while I was talking to his owner. When Norton was finally called, his speed in swimming was impressive, and jumping over the wave crest, he reached the exhausted coast. Just as most pit bull's devotees will guess, Norton would take anything you could shoot. My own pet dog will provide another example as a pit bull becomes completely attractive in a joke. In her case, she stepped forward in the ball joke. Since no one had the patience or strength to throw the ball to her for the time she would like, she has long learned to play lonely ball. The game consisted of squeezing the very strong ball between its paws until it jumped away through the room. She then expected a moment to see if someone would go off and throw her back to her or not. If not, she quickly caught the ball herself. Another game she invented was her own version for the game, stealing the bacon. She leaves the ball visibly in the living room and backwards to the middle of the hall and lies down, and always keeping an eye on the ball and for us suspiciously. If no one makes a movement to the ball, it retreats even more to the end of the corridor to give us another chance. If someone makes a movement to the ball, she invests for her and usually wins the race. She has developed so many variations for her ball game that they are numerous and very complex to count them. In one word, pit bulls are dogs-oriented dogs and will often surprise their owners with what they can do. Many pit bulls are seduced by mechanisms that move and/or make noises. Thus, grass, electric or manual cutters are often the purpose of the attention of a pit bull. My old Wallace Bad Red was a dog attracted to the grass cutters. I had to rush it near a side wall as I used the cutter. I once arrived very close to him with a pushing cutter, and Red grabbed one of the wheels, lifted the heavy sideboard completely off the ground, and put it to the floor so hard that it broke one of the iron wheels. And I almost had to use a stick to get the cutter away from it. Following the same vein is the tale of the breeder Peterbilt, Babe. As the Babe owner pointed out when he told me his story, most people who are not familiar with these dogs are amazed at their abilities. The incident occurred in time when Perry, Babe owner, was renting a house and some properties. His dogs were stuck in cables with pulleys and axles of wheels in a lot adjacent to the house. The owner of the lot was talking to Perry about using his new tractor grass cutter to cut the tall grass in the lot, and he wanted to know if he could work safely around the dogs. Perry assured that none of his dogs would bite someone and only asked the grass cutter to be handled carefully to avoid the engine to cause some damage to them, jumping stones or branches, and so on. Convinced enough, Perry discovered about a week after the entire lot was changed and clean. He noticed, however, that there was an area near badly cut Babe, but since the landowner was known for drinking a little, Perry attributed it to it. Later when he saw the man greeted him for his beautiful work. "Yeah," he said. "But that black dog there almost took my leg away. I was exactly cutting around the area near her, and the next thing I know is that she took the cutter from the rear wheel and dragged him toward her aside. One engine weighing 200 pounds and my weight on top, and the small dog dragging us aside. I was lucky to go out alive." Perry sued to explain that Babe was behind the grass cutter and not his. Fortunately, the grass cutter driver was able to perform some skilled maneuvers and get out of the bitch's reach. Not to mention what she would have done to the grass cutter. The dog on the tree and the cat in the alley I mentioned earlier. I referred to the fact that there is a high percentage of dogs that climb into trees in our breed than in others. Some time ago in my city, a martial arts expert in body formation caught the pit bull fever. Since he owned a gym, he influenced a number of other karate fighters and heavy lifters, and therefore there was a huge contingent of them who had pit bulldogs. And one of them ended with a tree climbing. If you have never had a tree climbing, they are a little difficult to deal with. Somehow it doesn't seem right to see a dog on a tree. This dog, Chip, seemed to climb the trees simply because it had a better view. Chip was kept in a backyard surrounded by tall wooden fences, and he was certainly curious about what would be behind them. The first time Bill, the Chip owner, saw the dog on the tree, he was gaping. He was even more astonished to see the dog right at the top of the largest tree in the backyard. Chip apparently imagined that it was Bill's time to return home from work, so he climbed at the top of the tree to see over the house when Bill came. The only problem was that Bill was so astonished at seeing so high Chip that he almost crashed with the car at the garage gate. Although Bill finally got used to seeing the animal on the tree all the time, visitors and neighbors had difficulty believing with their own eyes. One of the branches of the huge tree saw over the alley, and Chip wore it to control the cats that bound between the trash cans. We can only imagine the reaction of several cats when discovering a dog with malevolent look looking at them from a tree branch 6 meters above them. One afternoon, however, Bill was talking to a friend in the alley when the conversation was interrupted by a shrill cry of a cat. A few meters of them, there was a cat in her tiger hair, while looking with challenge and horror for Chip on the branch well above. "Well," said Bill's friend, "I never thought I would see a difficulty pit bull because of a kitten." The World of American Pit Bull. Experiences written by me, and some by other authors as well, who have appeared in the last 2 years at Sporting Dog Journal or the American Pit Bull Terrier Gazette, formerly called American Pit Bull Gazette, and yet called by habit, were included in this chapter. In this collage of articles can be seen the impression of events over the last few years and the concern of creators in general. I tried to include a variety of scenarios under different aspects of the breed, but I hate the excessive use of others' writings, even if there were many quality articles that I would be happy to include. I thought to include some articles with opinions that would be divergent with mine, but I felt that such a thing could be confused for new creators, so most of what appears here are written that are in accordance with what I think. But to be honest, my positions are much more considerable in the habit of talking about the overall opinion of pit bull creators. The reader will notice that my dedication of this book includes, to the memory of Harvey Greenwood. I have a good reason to include this dedication. First of all, Greenwoods are good friends and good people. Your children, almost all already grown up now, are charming, clemented, and attentive, everything you would like your offspring to be. This was not an accident, as Ralph and Renee are good parents and guardians, and they are based on the family. This made Harvey's tragic death much harder to accept. I originally planned to write a part of Harvey myself for this book as an explanation for the dedication, but I believe it could not be as eloquent as the following article written by Greenwood themselves shortly after Harvey's death. He was a dog lover all his life. Harvey Eugene Greenwood, born March 4, 1961, deceased on October 25, 1981. Harvey loved life and lived it with intensity. He loved children and his patience to them brought them the best. Several times neighboring children were looking for him to go out and go play with them, although he is a man. He loved a dog, any dog, and they made an important part in both his life and his death. Many times we would wake him up to go to school or work and find that he had gone to the kennel and brought some mutt who was gaining for love and attention. I will never forget the night that your partner chosen for bed was a CIA Doberman trained for attack called Saber. As soon as I played the dawn that morning, Saber responded like a trained dog in only a hurry. Knocking between us and a descend Saber calmed my nervous stomach. Harvey was excellent when dealing with any dog inside or outside the grove. Whatever the constitution of the dog, he treated him with love and compassion in place of his grooming or kennel, demonstrating to a dog, or in a drastic situation, with a cold head and a firm hand. It made it look easy. But it was pit bulldog that was special to him. He cleaned a lot of dirt from dogs such as Jimmy Boots, Clean, CH Cobra, Dodie Patch, Okie, Davis, and Black Sabbath, the last two belonging to Maloney, who proved to be a problem for him on a Utah display. He marched many miles, running beside them, his physical strength matching that of the dog. When the accident occurred, it was a hurt dog that became the focus of Harvey's attention. He was taking care of a dog that had been hurt that night. When he woke up in the early hours of the morning to see the dog again, a strong fire was expelled with violence from the bathroom and blocked the way to the door. He forced his way and kicked the door, but later thought about the dog made him hesitate more than he had imagined, and the toxic smoke was too much for him. He managed to throw the dog out of the door, but he fell about me. And so it was that both in your death and in your life that dogs had an important participation in your life. Your life was short, but full. He was loved and in return he loved. When your thoughts wander the dogs you love, remember Harvey and your laughing face. We will always love him, Harvey. Our hearts are broken. A loaded weapon. A total buzz was caused in my city when a local veterinarian warned a client that when he bought his pit bull puppy, he had a loaded weapon that could fire anytime, probably when he least expected. Well, a mixture of devotees from Bull Terrier, Stafford, and Pit Bull were all now ready to lynch the good doctor and expel him out of town. Everyone was angry because they thought the veterinarian was saying that pit bull was an undick and non-reliable dog. Since I knew the veterinarian in person, I was quite sure that he didn't mean such a thing, and I was right. All he was doing was to warn his client to be careful with his dog about other dogs. I didn't discuss such a warning because I always stressed for the same thing. As a dog lover, it hurts me very deep to see a pit bull go to the fight against a mutt, for example, other than a pit bull. The mutt may start full of trust, but it soon becomes an expired and terrified animal. No one can make a legitimate complaint about the congenital propensity to fight pit bull as long as their owners are responsible people who keep the dog confined or in the chain. As I said before several times, this is the law for all dogs anyway. Our veterinarian was aware that many pit bulls will live with other dogs, but he didn't want his client to be unleashed in letting his dog run loose. The problem is that the urgency to fight comes in different pit bulls at different ages, and when it really comes, it can come so suddenly and without warning. However, pit bull with people has the greatest arrangement of dependence and stability on all dogs. In fact, I do not know any other breed that can be severely injured, run over by a car, for example, and can still be read without fear of taking a bite of it. It would be non-realistic, however, to say that no pit bull is a danger to any human. First, some of our dogs are trained for attack by people who want to use them as guard dogs. Second, as in all races, there will be some that will be defective behavior and therefore not worthy of trust with humans. In such cases, there is no mistakes, a pit bull is quite capable of fatal injuries in a large, robust man. A good maxim for storing in the head is this: a pit bull is less likely to attack a human than probably any other dog, but if he really attacks he is infinitely more dangerous. So we are not going to be disappointed with serious newspaper reports about pit bull attacks on people. I checked many of these reports, and it was usually found that it had not been a pit bull at all. But none of them let us deceive that such attacks have never occurred. As Dr. Leon Whitney once indicated, dogs of almost every races were involved in attacks on people, many of them fatal, especially when dogs are in packs. I remember well that a few years ago, 3 small Pekins killed a baby. For some reason, even if pit bull is not on the list of races of those who bit people the most, when a pit bull attack happens, the news is on the first page of the news, and the attitude is always, it seems, that the breed is created to be bad. In the wake of such publicity in Florida, some stunning legislators are currently proposing to ban procreation. There is an underlined lesson for us here. Never tolerate a pit bull that doesn't like humans. And this is not typical of the race. Unfortunately, some of my good friends seem to consider their own pit bulls who don't like humans as protectors. I am thinking of a particular colleague who has just become a defender for one of the best teams of the National Football League. I did everything except punched your nose, but I'm not that dumb. To make him understand. Pit bulls are not Doberman pinchers. They are too formidable to let them stay like this. So, my friends, donates how much it hurts, let's put them to sleep. They can be rare, but one attack of one of them is enough to generate unbelievable publicity and, in fact, delivers a loaded weapon to the enemies of the race. Teaching a pit dog. Strangely, humanists, with their fantasy stories about training pit dogs using kittens, and small dogs like bait, to taste blood, probably caused the increase over cruelty than any other type of propaganda produced because there are more people on the periphery in the pit dog fraternity who apparently take this absurdity seriously and react accordingly. Stories thus become self-sufficient at least to some extent. Recognizing that there are some novices who sign this newspaper, I would like, as a dog and cat lover, to describe the appropriate teaching of a young pit dog. For starters, it should be understood that young pit bulls reach maturity in many ways and at different stages. Some are furious and will fight with other puppies only a few weeks old. Others only when they are a few months old will they go to older dogs. Dogs with a more normal limit will not show any haste to fight up to a year of age. There were other dogs that did not start until they were 3 or 4 or even 5 years old. As hard to believe, courage seems to have little to do with how early a young dog gives the initial kick. Some of the greatest dogs of all time started late. But there is no doubt that many of the good ones started with very young age. Some creators like to accommodate young dogs and do nothing to them until they are at least 2 years old. Others allow them to begin with less age, but they do not give them any hard task until they complete the maturity. Most of the best creators I met, Wallace, Leitner, and others, used a similar method to start young dogs. It's more or less. When young dogs are at age when they may be ready to start, an older dog is selected, usually a considerable but not so talented fighter that he will scare a young dog and possibly stop him. The dog is taken to walk alongside young dogs daily. Some of them will ignite and want to fight immediately. Others will try to play or simply act like puppies. Whatever the reaction, the older dog is not allowed to make contact with younger dogs. This routine can take days, until weeks, and all young dogs will be kept that until they long for the fight. Finally, one of those who act most aggressively from these young dogs will be allowed to contact and will be entitled to short fights, 3 to 5 minutes, right there in place. If the suitor acts well and seems to like it, he gets a chance for a short fight in the ring, possibly after a pair of chained fights. These fights should be spaced at least 1 month between one and the other to give enough time for the wounds to scar. The fight in the groin should be short again, and the young dog must probably be scratched a couple of times, very close. So a good way to deceive is to take the other dog and then make the young dog loose so he can search the other dog on sight, all the time being praised for the great work done. This total series of quarrels can be called the confidence structuring stage. Gradually the fights are extended, and a variety of opponents with various fight styles are used. This is the learning phase of the training of young dogs. It is during this time that he gets an opportunity to develop a style that best suits him. After this phase, the next step is the game test or a lower competition, but then this is another story. In conclusion, some creators will laugh at such a back training program, feeling that either the dog has or not felt for fighting. Others may want to avoid excessive struggles, feeling that each fight has its tribute by various means. However, short fights give the dog more than they take. And those who protect this system feel that every extra fabric scar that can be incurred is well offset by the tips and the experience that the young dog will learn. The American Pit Bull created for fight as a family guard dog and defense dog. The American Pit Bull created for fight is by far the largest family and defense guard dog available. We based this statement after trying Germany imported German Pastors, Dobermans, Rottweilers and famous American creators, Italy's Neapolitan Mastiffs, American Kennel Club Champions line and American Kennel Collection Unidal collection. While all these races have many qualities, there are as many of these as the American Terrier Bull created to fight. The type of dog we are looking for must have the following qualities. First, he has to have intelligence to learn and do obedience work. According to him, he has to have a high pain tolerance to resist gross games of young children. Third, he has to physically be without any concern for dysplasia or other weakened defects. Fourth, he has to be brave, since this will allow him to react with courage and without fear of the complete attack of an armed aggressive man without giving up whatever the mistreatment he will suffer. While all the races I mentioned earlier display some of these qualities, only the APBT breed created for fight will display them all. This brings us to a difficult problem. How do you get an APBT breed of fight? The only way to make sure to get such an animal is to buy it from a breeder who has this type of dogs. These types of dogs are clear dogs of fight or Rhine. To preserve the dog from APBT fight, one must combine or at least register these dogs and then reproduce those who show the best courage. This is a problem, as dog fight is a violation of state, local, and federal laws when it concerns the interstate. Let's see what these fighting dog breeders are producing. First of all, they are producing the hardest fight dog in the canine world, the APBT. Let's look at this point more closely. After visiting as many as 50 kennels of Rottweiler, Doberman, German pastors, Akita and Mastins, I heard them all telling an advantage over some incident where one of their dogs hit some dog or talk about the fighting skill of their dogs. One of the world's greatest Rottweilers creators lives near me in Chesapeake, Virginia, and tells of its dogs that their dogs are the hardest bitten dogs in the world and that no dog can resist their big and bad Rottweilers. In the Akita kennel I visited, the woman who owned him told the advantage of her Akita's fighting ability and how they were used in Japan for this purpose. She then continued to say that anyone who had one would have the most wicked dog around. Dog World magazine, The Dog World, even wrote an article about an Akita that surrounded an American pit bull. These same people who told advantages about the hardness of their dogs with other dogs, shrinks with fear when an APBT dog fight is mentioned. Well, what I'm wanting to say, no matter what kind of dog you have, especially those who have guard or work dog breeds, they all want the harder dog around, whether it admits or not. If my dog were to get into a fight for God, I wouldn't want him to lose or beyond, so because he doesn't have a dog that gets into a fight, he will not only win, but will certainly be less injured seriously. The fight APBT breed is this type of dog. These fighting APBT dogs can be encouraged to tolerate and avoid fights with other dogs. A good example of a fight breed dog that is good with other dogs is my newest Perturbuilt dog. For those of you who do not know, let me explain that. He is a champion fighter and 5 times winner. Well, guess who is the best companion of the old Perturbuilt? None other than our German pastor trained for 4-year-old attack, Cornbread. These two dogs did not grow together as we just acquired Perturbuilt. This even ruins the theory that the race of APBT's struggle is crazy murderers and will annihilate other dogs after feeling the taste of blood. In addition to producing the most brave fight dog, let's see what we can have when we created a fight dog. First, we will have an intelligent dog that serves its owner's voice and is responsive to him. This is important when fighting, as a good Rinha dog should be responsive to the voice of encouragement of its owner when in combat. Simply think about it for a moment. If a dog in the middle of a fight is responsive to its owner's voice, simply think how responsive it will be to its owner's voice simply in simple obedience tasks. This responsiveness will allow you to train it faster and more efficiently for any task. Second, the fight dog has the greatest pain tolerance than any animal in the world. When fighting, they can resist the tremendous amount of pain without even one moan. It is this quality that makes it the dog's best dog in the world for young children. While the tug of ears or a poking in the eye given by a child will cause great pain to another breed that is not predisposed to pain, an APBT fighting dog will take the letter simply because it does not hurt that much. Third, a dog of fight is physically healthy. If he had poor bone formation, hip dysplasia or weakness in muscle tissue, he would certainly not be used for struggle and would not have been included in any procreation program. When purchasing this type of dog, you may be safe to get a physically healthy dog. The same cannot be said about other activity races, as hip dysplasia and other physical problems have excessive problems. The last and most important aspect of race is courage. Courage is the willingness to endure punishment and never abandon the fight. Any fight dog creator will create their best fighter dogs. Because if a dog leaves a fight, even if it is winning, it will be declared the loser, and this way you have lost the fight. Now one can see the importance of creating hunting dogs to fight dogs. Courage is also a highly desirable feature for a guard and defense dog. While any of the races mentioned can stop close to 90% of aggressive intruders, what is done from the other 10% of these aggressors? They include people who are not afraid of dogs and feel confident enough in their own physical skills to hit an aggressive dog. There is a need for a dog that will not give up no matter how bad he is injured. When we look at the desirable quality we want for a guard and defense dog, all point to the APBT breed of fight. There are several versions for this dog. There is Terrier AKC Staffordshire, which was of the same breed but through selective creation only for conformation, they almost eliminated the desired qualities of a fighting dog and thus those necessary for the first-class custody and defense dog. Then we have another breed known as the American Pit Bull Terrier Pit Bull Pet and Exhibition. He was crossed with the blood of the American Staffordshire nor not created from or for the fight lineage for several generations. It is also being created for conformation and in some cases for Schutzhund task. While this is good, it will not truly test the physical condition of the dog, tolerance for pain, or courage. While this is probably the best choice than AKC Staffordshire Terrier, it is still much less desirable than the American Pit Bull breed of fight. While many people are criticizing the creators of the fight APBT breed and the dogs themselves, I would like to greet it for producing the most magnificent dog in the world. As he is now, his life can last less or his quality diminished by the humanists who prefer to destroy him than to take time to learn more about them and their many productive uses. Japanese grooming dogs. The interest of APBT creators in the grooming is because he is intelligent, powerful, and a relatively brave dog. It is a species of the Mastim race, which is a descendant of the Molossos. He was a great warrior dog known to the Egyptians. It is designed in the sculptures of its walls called ribs. For this reason, such is the fast dogs of the greyhound type. And there are Assyrian fries that tends to support Richard Stratton's belief that the Japanese grooming has long been a distinct race. Although the Tosas are adaptable and serve as guard and company dogs, their fame is because they were most important Japanese native fights, who prefer the word Nipponese. The weight range of the Tings is 45 pounds for the small to almost double. They resemble the first bullmastins that were developed in England, but they are much less kissed. The Tosas are valuable and they receive better bed and table and medical attention than most pit bulls. Its diet consists mostly of sea proteins, cooked with cereals and seaweed. Sea protein includes fish, squid, and the broth of shellfish soups. Bones of meat are not usually supplied to them. Your training differs from the Anglo-American method. It includes simulated combat between carefully gagged dogs. This is considered more vigorous than walking in the park. Competitions between Tosa dogs has experience in consideration, thus weight is not the only consideration. These competitions involve oriental ceremonies that are carefully observed. They are not applicable in tournaments involving a grooming and some other race. A tournament between two Tosi usually ends when a combatant decides that he is losing. He then leaves the arena quickly. The winner does not pursue him. The loser is considered under the same example as a boxer when his coach plays the towel. The boxer is identified as a loser, but he is not exiled from the country, and there is always the expectation that he can try again on another date. Before despising a grooming dog ritual, it is worth noting that courage comes in many ways. There are individuals who will fight in a bar, with many opponents, but lack interest in fighting in a ring for money. There are bikers who will ride their Harley-Davidson recklessly on a cliff but will not resign from the work they hate. There are dogs that are afraid of men but are no fear of other dogs, and so on. In competitions between a grooming and an APBT, the ceremonial rules do not apply. Agreements are made tailored. The most prognized element is for the practice of time. Most of the Tosa's victories occur between 15 to 18 minutes. They tend to lose competition if time exceeds this duration. The dog's history. It is difficult to make a positive statement about the origin of the domestic dog, Canis familiaris, family dog. Dogs have an original basic structure but can change greatly in appearance. Over the hands of the man, the domestic dog moved much from his ancient of previous origin. There is convincing evidence of fossils that carnivores, meat-eaters, of many widely different types have emerged with certain others from a common ancestor during the Paleocene era, see Time Geological Chart. Modern carnivores are relatively difficult to characterize. Certain characteristics, however, seem to remain the same, such as the number of incisors and the well-developed canine teeth. The current branch absent from the different carnivores can be said that it began in the Oligocene period, see graph, but the line can be drawn back through the canine or carnivorous type dogs of the last EOE and graphic, see graph, to the carnivorous type of the fingernail in the Paleocene era, Until returning to the Credento-insectivo type that includes both animals that eat meat and insects, then so many other animals originated. Until their extinction during the Paleocene, the creators were the predominant carnivorous animals. From creodonts came what is known as the carnivores, which were small primitive animals in their structure with low skulls, small brains and a complete game of tooth. The canine tooth, good to cut close, were not yet developed. The limbs and body were long and thin with a long tail. The four members usually ended in 5 fingers and they walked with their soles, their feet totally touching the floor. The first true animals with separate feet, emerged in the Paleocene era, possibly from artoid carnivores. The assholes expanded during the Oligocene era. In contrast to the creators, the little ones seemed to have a larger and more developed brain and real canine teeth that were located more in front of the head. These characteristics are exactly typical of the fiscipeds, and for this reason the files are considered as the most primitive assholes. The small fed, meat-eater lived in the forest by depreding small animals that live in the dense scrub or trees. The feds and their relatives were the direct ancestors of modern carnivores or meat-eaters. The ancient artoid carnivores were like their ancestrals, nurses in which they were probably inhabitants of the forest that hunted small fighters that they could take in the woods and trees. 2 carnivorous animals, Cynodictis, found in the Eoenic era, and Hesperocian, later found in the Oligocene era, were among the first canines. Although they still had many characteristics of their ancestral little files, they showed certain aspects that would characterize them as dogs or canines. They showed some length in their legs and paws, and the canines were more like blades than they were in the little ones. From Hesperocian, later several stages of canine development. In the Miocenic era, see chart, were the Cynodictis carnivores, followed by Timactus, found in the Pliocenic era, see graph, and finally for modern dogs such as Pleistocene kennels, see graph, and recent times. This sequence represents the main line of dog evolution. Man and dog lived together and worked together since the Neolithic era. The variety of modern dog species is proof of how they can change genetically and the explanation of how they differ in the appearance of their canine ancestors. However, certain basic primitive structures remained unchanging. How to create, train, and obtain an APBT for the purpose of a family guard and defense dog, and other short stories. Before you start on how to train an APBT, let me first describe the type of situation my training method serves. Keep in mind that this method is not so good when compared to work that a trained professional will do if he took your dog to audaist him to you. This should, however, be good enough for most novices to do at home without spoiling your dog or spending a fortune to have it trained. The situation that is most common for an owner of an APBT fight breed is that the owner usually has a family and lives in a community, keeps the dog in his home and has an average of visitors in her. Certainly it doesn't sound like the fine person you described as a typical APBT owner for me. It's not, Mr. Human Society. He needs a dog that will obey simple commands, be wonderful with the children, know when it is right to fight and, of course, will stop an aggressor on his track if necessary. What he doesn't need is a dog that will get the house dirty with his needs, destroy furniture, eat his neighbor's Doberman, may he be released to do his needs in his backyard, or to bite his daughter's boyfriend, even that he deserves it. First of all, selecting is important. Refer to my prior article because you should insist on purchasing a fighting pta. You should visit those who have experience with fighting dogs that have been successful and were created to be that way. Avoid kennels whose owners have advantages of how your dogs hit 5 German pastors or 6 Akitas but never found a remarkable specimen than their own creation. Also avoid kennels whose fame over dogs is sustained because their grandparents were good dogs. Spend time by finding that your puppy's parents have done more than eating, sleeping and having sex. Now you can make a smart selection based on the following. 1. When you visit a kennel, see how your puppy's parents react and view when you go to them when in the company of your owner. What I like to see a dog do is accept me and be friendly, as it should be obvious to the dog that its owner accepted me, and a good dog should follow this process. 2. Ask the owner if you can meet them alone. A good dog should react or bark or make a hell. Any reaction between these two will be acceptable. They should not run into their dog house and pray for help. The attention should be drawn that some dogs are shy because of mistreatment or lack of socialization, and they will not always throw this peculiarity in their offspring. 3. The parents of your puppy in view should be impressive in appearance. That's why I want to say that they should conform to the standards of ADBA, American Association of Dog Breeders. The reason for this is simple. One of the biggest advantages in having a dog is for a psychological impediment to any potential troublemaker. If it looks hard, then most people won't face it. But if he looks like a mixture between a mutt and a greyhound, then the person may test it because he looks like. 4. About size, I really see no difference that this makes about your power. The only advantage the size has is to stop an aggressor for its appearance. It seems that the bigger the dog is, the lower the attacker's attempt to attack him. Poppy, our 40 kilos female could cross a man like a knife through butter, but on the other hand they could also ch Mama Sean, and both females have only half of this size. I think this could be like a choice to take a 357 or 44 Magnum. One is bigger, but both will kill you. If you can find larger dogs that are created for fighting and have room to keep a big dog, then I will have one of them, as long as it is less likely to prove your punch. But on the other hand, I never had an offer from any of the madmen I know of fighting some Roxy with Roxy equally. 5. When selecting your pup from a litter, take what acts with the most audacity and the most protruding of the group. A simple test to do is get a puppy that you like the litter and put it in a strange place. If he walks around and still act with audacity, you have a good puppy there. For those who want a more detailed test, ATTs has a series of tests that can help you. Now that you've acquired your puppy, the most important thing to do is spend time with him and start educating him to do his needs outside the house, not gnaw the furniture, etc. Do not fear talking to him or taking him everywhere where you go. Those who know my female Katie understand how the attention she received when she was little helped her in many situations. To educate it, try to follow the following ideas. Buy a large, airy kennel and line it with newspapers. This will make you confined while you are out or unable to supervise you properly. Always let him go outside when you leave, after eating, and as soon as you get home. Take some dirty newspaper sheets and place them on the clean and leave them on the door, and put some outside. When he is running loose and has to do his needs, he will probably do them where his smell is. That is, of course, at the door. When you come or hear that he is at the door, let him leave. Soon you can take the newspaper from the door, as long as it has a habit of going there to ask to leave. In case of an accident on your rug, clean it well with a urine neutralizer to eliminate any odor. If you follow these steps, you have already gotten a lot in training your puppy. For toys, I give a sturdy ball, lasts with rubber. Never give old shoes, as most puppies cannot see the difference between an old shoe and a new one. Now that he is educated, his next step is to start obedience training. Buy a good book on obedience training, or take your puppy to a class of obedience when it is 6 to 8 months old, if it is still sociable and not ready to fight. The class will be most likely sponsored by local human society, so a wise word is not to tell them that it is an APBT. Tell them that he is a staff, or a mixed race. I know some classes here in Virginia that do not allow APBT, and even if they accept, you will be subject to the instructor's prejudice. What's more, you can get problems with any of the simpleries, who will want to put a Siberian Husky to fight with your pit bull while he gives you a lecture of how cruel is the dog fight. If his dog beats your dog in a fight, and you live in California, then arrange an order for your arrest with a dog fighting accusation and also one for the Human Society instructor on charges of promoting fights. Simply think about how they and you will be able to imagine a way to accuse you. But chances they are, if you don't tell them that it is an APBT, you won't have any problems. When you are spending time on your puppy, always use positive reinforcement for well-made prowess. Never call him and then punish him, as he will relate the fact that he went to you with the punishment. Always go to him and scold him verbally. If you spend a lot of time on him, he will know by the tone of his voice he made bullshit. Once your puppy knows your name, it is very sociable, polite and is trained in obedience, you can now go to the next phase. That is, conditioning him to be a guardian of his and his family without being a source of poor publicity or legal problems. How to start this is relatively easy. When you hear someone at the door, say with a surprised voice, "What is that puppy, what is that?" If the puppy barks, compliments it a lot, then put it in the back room and allow your visitor to enter. Then bring back your puppy and tell him, "It's all right," and let the visitor stroke it. Always do this and he will soon know that no one except family members can come and go through the door. And second, when you accept someone, he has to accept him too. The key again is the tone of your voice. Never allow anyone to turn your back or try it to see if he bites. The only thing you can have is either a ruined dog or a ruined person. Repetition, consistency, and time spent on your puppy are the keys to have the maximum of your puppy. If you plan to make a reheated version of this method, then you will fail and it is better to put your puppy out in a chain, or even better, have none. My ideas may sound simple, but if you try to find far more than satisfactory results. If your impetus impels to do more, then put your energy in training obedience. Any agitation made by a newbie or dog owner, "This is a bad idea," can direct as well-educated fight dog in the creature that human society writes about in its advertising informative reports they send to make money. These ideas must allow a newbie to have a dog that will be all that a man can ask. After all, your dog is 100% an experienced and true American Pit Bull Terrier. The nature of the animal. A pit bull is a killing machine with a trigger that responds to minimal pressure, and you never know what to do it. I saw a person with surprise to say these words, because the person who was speaking was not simply a humanist with the tendency to exterminate the breed of bulldogs. No, he was an experienced and respected creator, and more than that, I realized that there was only a real drop in what he was saying, almost none of course, but enough to give legitimacy to his comment. Later, I received at least some complaints from some creators who said I exaggerated that they are kind and reliable dogs regarding their attitudes towards people. On the other hand, I received news from Europeans who are disappointed by the dogs they were apparently imported because they were not aggressive with humans. These creators in Europe and Asia and the newbies in this country may be interested in knowing the true nature of the race. To really understand our race, it is necessary to understand that in all races there is a certain variation of temperament. Many people will be surprised to know that a reasonable percentage of pit bulldogs are softly shy, sometimes very shy about people. And that includes laugh winners, dogs that were real dens in the ring game. Searcy Jeff, Art, Tonka, and Peterbilt were examples of good dogs that were to some extent shy. Now some owners are ashamed of such dogs, feeling that they reflect unfavorably in the race. Same breeders of Rhine dogs are inclined to favor protruding dogs about the shy. I also have apprehension about shyness, because I have this image of bulldogs with fierce and firm temperaments. I think this image is mostly correct. Nevertheless, I made a cross of Peterbilt and I intend to make a Tonka eventually. The quality of dogs is too big to ignore, and fortunately, they do not seem to produce a preponderance of shy dogs. On the other side of the spectrum are the bulldogs, the ancients called them screwballs and usually practiced euthanasia in them, that will attack people. In such a dog, my friends, we really have a real dangerous animal. These dogs are not only perfectly able to kill a man, but they can also have the challenge of eating him too. Some of these killers are good dogs, Bully Sun and Pit General would be examples of this. However, they are minorities, being exceeded from afar by occasional shy dogs in the Rhine. The ancients believed that man's man were prognized as non-quarrelsome or mutts. I don't believe it, but I think a people fight dog is a rare article. I never had at least one in all these years when I created dogs. Among them, we have the typical bulldog, easy to deal with and kind to people but evil with other dogs. Most of them are very nervous around other dogs. In canine exhibitions they can be seen absolutely uncontrollable between them. However, their manipulators are able to put their hands in the mouth of these impetuous demons and lift the lips so that the judge can see what the dental structure is like without any fear of being bitten. Because it is the typical bulldog, a good guard dog, I always say that they are not natural guard dogs since they are always barking and are suspicious of strangers. However, they can be trained for guard and or trained for attack, on which if they invariably make other races seem unfortunate compared to. To add 1. There is an extremely small percentage of bulldogs that will bite people. Some are aggressive and are not likely to make a sustained attack. Others are not afraid of humans and, in fact, are extremely dangerous to them. Fortunately, the bulldogs in this category are extremely rare. Unfortunately, some novices are inclined to ignore these features or even create for it. To be honest, even I would not have the courage to kill a quality dog of Bully Son or Pit General. However, I am usually in favor of the practice of euthanasia in pit bulls who do not like people. 2. Another larger percentage of bulldogs is shy with people, and sometimes, but not always, shy of noise as well, such as stallers or gunshots. These dogs are usually fearless with other dogs and are often quarrelsome. Although these dogs are often very intelligent, it is difficult not to develop special agreement with them. However, there are 2 reasons to avoid this trace except in cases of excellent individuals. One is for the good of dogs, for it should not be pleasant to be painfully shy. The other is that the trace does not fit the mystique of pit bull. 3. So we were left with the vast majority of bulldogs that are completely kind to people and offer no danger to them. Discord. Like most of you, I read my Gazetta, from end to end, and I usually find interesting and provocative articles. Occasionally, a letter or article contains something I disagree in, but I usually don't care, as they are usually issues of little consequence, and in other words, there is room for diversity of opinion. In fact, such diversity stimulates thinking and even studying research. However, in the last edition of Gazette, there were some items that either reflected very bad in the breed or will unleash the novices. For this reason, I would like to take some time to talk about this particular discord. First, Mr. Bame David in the point of view laments the present popularity of the breed and blames in the chain's keeper. Well, I have to admit that I prefer the days when the race was unknown and not the subject of continuous sensationalist presentations through electronic and written media news. I would never have written my 2 books about the APBT if the cat wasn't out of the bag, so to speak. But it was inevitable that pit bull would become popular in these turbulent times. Simply take any magazine about dog exhibitions, and you will find that the races that are highlighted are Rottweiler, Doberman, Dane, etc. People who have these dogs are really looking for a pit bull, but they never knew anything about them until recently. Mr. David makes the mistake of putting all cats in the bag. While it is true that some salespeople have been harmful to the breed, as well as some fighting dog breeders, I really resign from the characterization of Mr. David to John P. Colby, as he was an honest creator and a merit for the race. And Mr. David is far from the beginning when he concludes that those who put their reputations on the line to defend the APBT are doing it for their own benefit. Sandra Keller never in her life has sold a dog, and those who know me know that I usually don't see dogs. But in any case, there are many creators who sell dogs on regular basis to the general public and who are goods for the race. I admit that I belong to the school that is inclined to consider the general race of suspicious dogs of dogs, but I am not so stupid to paint everyone with a single brush or blaming advertising aimed at humanists about them. Finally, any man will be foolish in trying to make money from any breed of dog. Some were successful, but talking frankly, it's a bad proposition. There are a lot of amateurs competition, and dogs are like rabbits in what they proclaim so proliferally that they can fulfill any demand in a relatively short time. So we will not hurry to condemn the reasons for the other directed to profit. In another letter, Mr. R. M. Ank created a case for the infusion of blood from outside the breeder by the creator, using the Armitage assessment of the first fight he has ever seen. In that fight, a half pit bull and half terrier Boston defeated a pure pit bull. What Mr. Enck didn't say is that, according to Armitage, this same dog had the towel played in his next fight for a pure pit bull. As I said before several times, there were undoubtedly other cross races with other races, but they were very rare because deep courage was always lost. Where everyone thinks that the word mutt came. Anyway, the APBT is pure and not weak, perhaps more than any other breed of dog. Finally, I would like to make some comments about Vince Cooper's provocative idea article. I don't know Mr. Cooper, but his article shows him as a very perceptive man. I will wrinkle my nose, however, to your article that most pit bulls are not brave, although I know what he means. Truly, most pit bulls are not brave to the point of dying, but I prefer to think of degrees of courage. If it were possible to test the courage of all races individually, we would theoretically end with a beautiful bell curvature for each race. There is no means of knowing for sure, of course, because there are no means of experiencing such a study. However, I think the average courage of other races is in the light years of pit bull. Also, novices should be aware that the Doberman that Mr. Cooper wrote is one of those excellent exceptions to the rule. Dogs of other races that may arise the pit bull in their own fight are rare, and even these excellent exceptions usually fall quickly when competing with good dogs. While I agree with Mr. Cooper that courage does not match intelligence, however, I think there was a selection process for intelligence in the Rhine because everything else being the same, intelligence was a defined resource. I very surely not I like the statement that fighting dogs range from intelligent to stupidity in combat. It may not be rational, but it is not stupid. A dog's instinct is not simply related to intelligence. Thus, it is not rational for a perdigero to indicate hunting, a retriever is so obsessed with hunting, or a hunting dog crawling when given the sign, but it is not stupidity either. It is simply a powerful instinct not linked to intelligence. To consider the point of view, let's consider the sexual attitude in humans. Now is this rational? No, leads us to all kinds of problems. But intelligent men are no less affected than fools. A few fighting dogs are really little babies when they are being examined by the vet, but as a race, they have the courage that allows them to cooperate in their treatment. More than any other breed, they seem to realize that we humans are trying to help them. Most veterinarians are especially pit bulls lovers precisely because of this particularity and because they are usually not afraid of being bitten by your patient, if it is a pit bull. While most pit bulls are not naturally aggressive to people and are not inclined to bark, they are psychological intimidation to possible intruders because of their imposing appearance. I also noticed that the pit bull that was trained for Schutzhund work, without fail, exceeding all competitions in the attack phase because of the intensity of your attack and the way it literally explodes to your opponent. The challenge here is to train the dog to abort the attack under command. Finally, some fight dogs may not be interested in fighting with other animals, but a considerable proportion may be, and believe me, they can be terrible, embarrassing all other races in this regard. Looking at a good pit bull doing a good job in a bad bull or a wild boar is an unbelievable view. I sincerely hope Mr. Cooper will not be offended by my details, since I enjoyed his article a lot, and I would not want to depreciate it. Like Mr. Cooper, I can enjoy other races, too. But also like Mr. Cooper, I have enough experience with other races that I can't satisfy myself with nothing less than a fight pit bull. Improving the breed. Pit bull devotees are a large amount, ranging from breeders to aficionados to a tiny number that actually compete with their animals. Without the creators, we would not have dogs. Without the devoted aficionados, we may not have the tolerance of the general public that the race now has, and without the owners of pit bull, we would not have the means to know which dogs are the appropriate dogs to create. They ask me a lot, what I consider to be the best trait or the best dog to create. I inevitably answer that it is very difficult to determine which the best trait or the best dog is. However, I will make an effort to list some dogs that I think are good male candidates for anyone who has a good dog and wants the best procreation. Of course, there will be many dogs of value that will be excluded for a variety of reasons, including the fact that I honestly don't know all about them for several reasons. Some will question the convenience of selecting the male without worrying about the trace, and it is certainly true that you really keep better uniform results being within one. However, a very high penalty is paid for blindly having a trace and thus avoiding males that are candidates for the condition of best in the country. Almost all dogs in the public study are possessed by people who obtain them after they have completed their careers in the Rhine. I have seen all one of the dogs I am recommending, and they have all the traits that are a credit for the breed. These features include personal characteristics such as disposition, intelligence, and charm, as well as distinct immediate ancestors, and, of course, they all have a good recording of Rhine that helps you ensure that we are perpetuating the skill, tolerance, and courage, as well as countless desirable traits. I am being hypercritical in my teams, and so I left off my list experienced dogs such as Peterbilt and Tonka, even if they have an excellent record in the Rhineline and produced good dogs, because they themselves are shy dogs themselves. But to be honest, both produced a wide percentage of non-shy litters. For this reason, readers should not back down of these dogs simply because I did not list them. Another worthy dog is Sorel Preacher, as he leaves nothing to be desired. Dogs like Going Light Barney, Luke, and a legion of other big ones have been left out because they are not in a public caution. Selecting a stallion, I consider the dog and its immediate ancestors. The quality I want is courage, ability to fight, indestructibility or hardness, intelligence, stable disposition, and longevity. In other words, I hope my stallion will be a super dog in every way, including appearance, but that would be a consideration of less. However, when looking for a stallion, we can afford to choose in all categories. As long as I put the qualities of fighting first, I will be accused of creating dogs for the purpose of fighting, but this is not a valid censorship. Of course, we want to perpetuate the essence of the race, and if we create for these characteristics, everything else, e.g. stable disposition, falls. Anyway, taking random, here are a few selections. Obviously, only dogs that are open to breeding are listed. Henry belonging to Patrick. Henry certainly finds the requirements of longevity, as he is 14 and still breeding puppies. A fighting dog and robust, his parents were of equal quality. Both Henry and his father, Tater, gained the classic 2-hour struggles on good opponents. Sooner this dog is the classic pit bull in appearance and temperament, at least in my opinion. He apparently left nothing to be desired as a Rhine dog, and his relatives were not inefficient either, not to mention his great-grandfather, the immortal Jimmy Boots. Thora never saw this dog, but I heard a lot about him and his relatives. You could not choose a better pedigree, as your father was the dog Snooty, a consummate artist and a great breeder, and his mother was the immortal Miss Poole Hall Red, a great bitch of Rhine and reproducer, and not many dogs are both. Poole Hall Red came from Boomerang, from which I expressed my admiration many times. Ace de Sherwood this dog, and all the other listed, too. It has a carefree disposition that I like in pit bulldogs, and he is a beautiful animal descended from such big as Red Baron, his father, and the great dog Alvin, his grandfather. Assassin only question about this dog is that he can take what he can give, as he demolished 3 opponents in short space. His longest fight lasted 30-8 minutes, and then there was no challenges. Since then, he has been sold and is now open to public procreation. He was proclaimed by Hank, who left Red Baby, who left Bolio, one of the greatest of all time, so his race leaves nothing to be desired. He is calm like a rock, a beautiful dog that I would certainly consider a good for any procreation program. Boots this dog was proclaimed by Hank, too, and comes from Sassy of Greenwood, who came from Jimmy Boots. This dog, like your father, is a big dog, but he has an absolutely mature arrangement and, like all the other dogs mentioned, is an absolutely calm dog, not given to lightning and uncomfortable barks. He is a 3-time champion and went beyond his 2-hour mark. Right, there is a partial list of breeders who, besides being large killer dogs with all the necessary characteristics, has the bonus of having all the individual quality of pit bull that helps the breed to be so grand that people become absolutely fanatic about her. Crocodile tears. Since so many dogs have been called alligator, alligator, or gator, and this was a common practice to refer to a Stormy Grove dog as a alligator, it can be instructive in at least two considerations to look at more than near the animal that inspired such respect. And in fact, there are some similarities between that old reptile and our beloved race. For one thing, they were more evil for ignorance, and both had their legends perpetuated over them, legends that persisted over thousands of years in the case of crocodiles. Sometime after 1793, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington authorized a French botanist to explore the western area of the Mississippi River. The man revealed himself not only an excellent botanist but also a spy for the French government. However, during his exploration and spying, Michaud, the botanist, obtained a small specimen of alligator from the Mississippi River benches, and he preserved him and sent him back to France to his friend F.M. Dodden so that he could examine the animal and give it a scientific name. Years later, Dodden presented a 2-volume work on reptiles and amphibians for the French Academy of Science and officially dubbed the alligator Crocodilus mississippiensis. To this day the alligator is scientifically known as Alligator mississippiensis, Dodden, 1801. Note that the generic name Crocodilus has been changed to alligator, by scientists later, and for this reason, Dodden's name is placed in parentheses. December 17, 1801, was the date Dodden published his work, and Mississippi was written with a P. There is also a Chinese alligator, but I fear I have told readers more than they would like to know about alligators. There are several legends that were perpetuated on crocodiles and later they were applied to the alligator, as it was considered a kind of crocodile by the former explorers. One of the legends was that the alligator wore its tail like an offensive weapon. Another was that you could distinguish females from males by the glow reflected in your eyes in the dark. There were many others, but one of the most intriguing was that crocodiles would cry on several occasions. This legend has persisted for hundreds of years without any basis in facts. And the only question was the reason for the behavior. Some said they were crying because they ate a Christian. Others said they cried because they had no more Christians to eat. Anyway, all were completely taken, and the explorers added to the legend's detail about their travels. For example, Thomas Ashe, who explored Mississippi in 1806, wrote, "I heard sobs, sighs, tears and moans of inexpressive agony and extension." And after getting into more details about the lamentations, he revealed that it was a multitude of alligators that was the source. Such absurdity, with repeated submission and recorded by a number of writers and explorers, is a demonstration chart of how it cannot be entrusted with the reports of eyewitness and for this reason are generally discounted in scientific circles. This is why I disregarded reports of how the old bulldog was crossed with a terrier to produce our race. There is simply very little evidence support, and there is a lot of evidence to dispute. Finally, did the Rhine dog creator really worry about other breeders, as the old saying, cutting the tails of the alligators and bringing them into the Rhine? Well, not really. First, the alligator is a predator and not a fighter. Second, although crocodilians, including alligators, are unique and have a heart with 4 sections, other reptiles have 3, their circulatory system is less efficient than mammals in general and certainly far less efficient than those of a bulldog. Third, if you compare an alligator that has the same weight as a bulldog, they don't look like that so imposing. However, the alligator is a magnificent reptile worthy of respect and study, but even worthy of giving its name to our dogs. Indemned, a little history. The first time I saw Bob Wallace, he was crying. I will have a lot to say later about the recent exploitation of the American pit bull breed and the slander of its owners. All bulldog owners are being subject to blitzkrieg, or blitz, with attacks from all sides. The reasons behind the attacks are disgusting by nature, mainly developed to fill the pockets of disseminators. The edition of the Geographic magazine on pit bull has run out quickly, and human society has made so much money, I truly believe they would be saddened if the sport was annihilated. Humanist hypocrisy is amazing, because they should know that they will never annihilate dog fights, and they should be prevented further as their efforts are counterproductive, tending to direct the most reputable people while actually encouraging the interest of disorders. Meanwhile, with the humanists bending their newly found muscles to the power given to them by recent legislation, the world truly took the air of an asylum assumed by the inhabitants. These are truly times that try the soul of man. And it's time to decide if you are quiet or fighting, a time to decide whether to abandon a brave breed or resist tyranny. Personally, I would rather fight oppression of what to be part of it. It is also a time to fix our own home. After all, Gio got a picture of a dead cat on a training machine, something I had never seen in 30-5 years of association with some of the best fight dog coaches of all time. Ironically, the clowns that did this with the cat probably took the idea of those same humanists who have spread rumors about the ridiculous stories of Bates for decades. However, it may also be the time for a break. A time to withdraw forces of the example of our brave race. A time for a real story about one of the bravest of competitions never witnessed. A story of a large dog, unarmed, almost destroyed, but absolutely indomitable. The dog was Tony, note the bold-fashioned spelling, acquired by Bob Wallace at the beginning of his career. Tony was a Circe great-grandson Jeff, and when he later crossed Madam Queen, a Circe Jeff daughter, Tony procreated King Cotton, an ace that, along with Tony, became a foundation for Wallace's lineage. Tony won previous competitions, and after he was retired to a luxury life as a breeder. Tony won his pre-heart competitions, as he was not blessed more talented than the average in any category. No one ever dreamed, nevertheless, how much heart this little dog was really. At least, not until the competition in Rulesville, Mississippi, in the 1940s. Tony competed with Ted by Slim Emerson, a giant who would later become famous in the competition marathons with Corvino's Thunder. When the dogs were released, Ted immediately went to Tony's shoulder. For those who are not aware, a broken bone is a rarity in the dog fight because the fight dogs are hard to hurt. Bob had no means of knowing that his shoulder was broken and not only temporarily disabled. Tony gave no illusion of this, his tail was upright and shaking, and he could always have support somewhere. But because of his difficulty, Ted was always ahead. Tony occasionally got an advantage, but she always had a short life, but his enthusiasm for the fight never hesitated. Finally, Ted went to Tony's other shoulder, and at this time there was no doubt that his shoulder was broken. In an hour and 40 minutes, Bob took Tony, so losing the competition. Taking by emotion and worried that he left his dog dominated a long time, Bob has put him to the ground for an apparent impossible courtesy fight. In fact, Bob just wanted to see if he was interested in trying to fight. Who could dream that he actually got it? Sounding lean and clumsy, but with an intensity and determination that lifted the audience, Tony began his arduous journey through the grove. Gradually advancing, both front legs completely inappropriate. Tony invested with the rear paws. 2 or 3 times he completely rolled over his back to correct his course on his opponent when his obstinate front of the front has obstructed him. When after 2 minutes Tony reached his opponent, he had to be separated with a stick. Bob, tears rolling down his face, raised Tony and wrapped him into a blanket. The audience got up and applauded him for 10 minutes. And Bob Wallace was not the only one who was crying. Profits and sensationalism. Get your facts first, and then you can distort them as you want. A new discharge of hypocrisy was achieved by employees of Geo magazine when they published their articles about fight dogs. As any casual observer knows, sensational magazines are money-making. Serious magazines, many of them well-regarded, have become a rare breed, and those that remain are compromised species, because almost all are at financial risk. It's a sad but true comment that sensational journals can lack prestige, but they swim in money. Geo would like prestige and money, so this makes a short attempt disguised to hide his sensational reasons for claiming the publication of the fight dog history to the reader's delight. For camouflage later, the magazine's ads contributed money to HSUS, $1,500. Anyway, if the magazine were really sincere at her crusades, she would reveal the true identities of her people instead of giving them fictitious names. Treated and inflammatory photographies are shown to pre-defined readers and ideas are exposed throughout the text because words that control the reader's reaction are used. Writers in this way make it seem that dogs hate each other, they will tear each other into pieces, and will crawl through the command to attack. It is difficult to imagine various activities that could come well below the scrutiny of a hostile approach. Simply think about the hay fever that could be done by journalists in the field of football. Blood clots could be shown, and some photos could be taken at the training site of seriously injured players, and sometimes permanently. The comment could be inserted that total paralysis was not uncommon. Also, any photographer could get some good crowd scenes shouting for blood. Scenes of substantial money changing hands can also be shown, and writers can allude to the fact that those gains have not been declared. In the text, the writers could discuss how each neat, ripping player is unable to suppress terrible screams and how 400 players a year, on average, lose their lives. Of course, given their tendency to pile up everything connected in the most remote medium with the activity, writers will naturally quote statistics on all children who are killed playing football, some in a dispute and even being run over by cars which they ignored because of his desire to play soccer even on the streets. Taking this absurdity even further, as our writers will surely do, it will even be mentioned that soccer players are known to attack and even kill people. Also, of course, fights and murders are known to take place between the bloodthirsty crowd, which is perfectly natural to understand, as we know that violence generates violence. Prominently inserted will be the fact that prostitution and drugs are a dominant part of the football scene. Even players use drugs, and, my God. San Diego Chargers, football team, was the focus of a drug scandal a few years ago. Yes, a truly sensational article can be written, but it won't be, because the public knows football and likes it. They also know something about it, so reporters will have to avoid distorting the facts rather than simply insignificance. And that the negative facts they give will be taken in perspective and thus in neglect. Unfortunately, the audience knows nothing about the pit bulls or the fight in the Grove, so they swallow the whole circus, all that any magazine with a sensational or newspaper or television mind wants to show. As for Lou Grant's show, American television program, the less you say, the better. I wouldn't hurt so much if it wasn't for the fact that this happens to be one of my favorite programs, and I'm not much television. It was a sad spectacle to see the writers of a quality program to be conducted by the nose, completely believing in the facts given by the cowardly humanists who had no stomach to write a debate about me, under any public meeting. The challenge has been put many months ago, and so far, not a single humanist had the courage to fight. Such experts are surely a poor source of information, and it was truly a tragic vision to see Lou Grant's show sink to those who put profit and sensationalism above truth and honesty. Who speaks for animals? Contrary to the opinion of my friends who think I am too old to have living parents, I have a father who is not only alive, but the mature age of 70-1 years is also a burning swimmer and a monocycle cyclist. He can traction in the bar and make so many stops in it that I can hardly keep the count. Unlike his only son, my father was a womanizer in his current marriage to his third wife, Martha Jane, recently retired as a teacher. My father, for his part, retired many years behind his work as head of the Colorado University Security Force, where I received one of my diplomas. Since my father's third marriage has resisted over 30 years, and I lived at home for a few years after I was turned off from military service, poor Martha Jane had to take me like a stepson at home. But we got along very well, and she introduced me to some things I still enjoy, such as the opera and stories of Archie and Mehitabel. One issue we didn't agree and we haven't argued was that of pit bulldogs. My stepmother is one of the most godly people I met, apart from my wife, with respect to animals and people, too, but especially with respect to animals. She is easily a victim of professional humanists who take care of people like her for financial contributions. Although she never said anything, I am sure that Martha Jane feels that I encouraged the dog fight with my articles and thus contributed to the cruel treatment of animals. Not being totally without conscience, I have meditated on this possibility to some extent. Here are my conclusions. First, I defended the breed of Pit Bull Terrier because I think he is worthy of defense for his supremacy, character, courage, and intelligence. Second, I have defended the dog fight because I am impatient with the promulgation of the absurd, especially absurd absurdity. I also defended the dog fight because I knew that if the audience was spoiled with stories that made the dog fight look worse than today is, then a push will be given to laws that will actually make it risky to itself race. Such laws certainly passed in some area of the country. In other articles, I have always constantly emphasized the appropriate treatment for animals. So also other creators, but right now I'm simply comparing myself with the humanists. 1. I defended appropriate dog housing. 2. I pointed out that the pit bulls were kept in chains and take all the precaution so that they would not kill or hurt other dogs from other races. 3. I pointed out that there is absolutely none of reason in bleeding, a humanistic term, a dog for the use of cats. 4. I encouraged a respectful attitude towards all dogs. 5. I pointed out the proper treatment of a dog injured in the fight, and 6. Show examples of great fighting dog breeders who, although they can stand to see a fight dog to be punished in a grove, were usually sentimental about animals and quite clamor with respect to their appropriate treatments. Now, contrary to, let's take a look at what some of the spokesmen of humanist organizations have done. Well, first, they had a small impact on real cruelty, or because they are unable to do so, or because they collide in the opposition of people of influence. But dog fight has been the full plate for them. They have almost zero opposition and have a large amount of publicity and public response. They, 1. Preach that the appropriate training for a fight dog is to try it with a kitten inside a bag of potatoes and finally let it kill it. 2. Promulgated the falsity that it was good for dogs of fight are bleeding, allowing them to kill cats and small dogs. I imagine if such sick minds would believe that some of the biggest fight dogs will not even hate kittens or small dogs. 3. To claim that electrical appliances were good for stimulate dogs to fight, and 4. Legislation sponsored by some states that require veterinarians to inform which beasts. Over the years, the beasts have been of special interest to me since, in theory, most are not expected to be brave. Simple observation tells me that there are so many brave dogs that bite man, as a percentage, as brave dogs in the pit bull family. Most veterans thought that men's borders should be destroyed and more definitely never used in a procreation program. I believe that a deeper look inside these dogs would be a lucrative project. Through my research and observation, I conclude that there are various types of people, each deserving recognition and comment. The most acceptable of people are those who are both protectors and territorial. Most bulldozers have this treatment varying in degrees, and the beauty of this is that it can be encouraged or discouraged depending on the needs of its owner. These dogs are usually the smartest bulldogs, and while they are usually kind to people, they will become a terror for the suspicious intruder and literally inhale a direct threat to their owner or property. The second most acceptable people's tender ride is the territorial scrap dog. This dog happily accepts its owners, but everyone else is not welcome in their domains. Far from his property, he is not so far aggressive except when challenged directly. These dogs are not for novices but can be maintained and are definitely a problem for dog thieves and various refuses. The last acceptable type is the scrap patio dog that will bite anyone anytime, simply for fun. Many of these dogs actually have to have their food thrown at them even by their owners. These dogs are only for professionals, and most are probably good candidates for execution. There are also excitable dogs that will bite you to see each other free and get another dog, cat, horse or whatever. These dogs are not definitely for amateurs and should be kept away from these types of situations as much as possible. Bully Son, C.H. Spade by Anderson and Sam Mosquitos were dogs of this kind. For me the most dangerous is the latent people bite that simply becomes bad without provocation. These dogs should always be destroyed as their unforeseen events make them an extremely lethal object. This recessive trend comes to light in other races, so why should pit bull be different? The percentage of malicious people in the pit bull family is extremely low. I believe that through the use of appropriate creation methods we can decrease this. Most of the attacks they give to the newspapers so much coverage are generally made by dogs without breed. Check the records. In most cases where a bulldog mistreats or kills someone, they are dogs that were created by amateur breeders and usually passed by several generations of individual frustrated races, most of which are equally bad creations. So in many cases the creator is wrong in everything except for a few instances, human error enters the disaster. There is much to be said about people's biting, but for the sake of a good judgment, all who have one, simply like all pit bull owners, should be very conscious. Only a case of negligence can mean a law against race in your area and change the public support of our dogs. This is exactly what we don't need at this point. People's biters, keep one if you have to have, but take care of it if you do it. Letter to Gazette. Gazette. I arrived here in Japan almost 2 months ago for a 3-year tour. I am based on an air base near Tokyo. I am a fan of pit bull for many years and I had the privilege of having 2 of them in the last 2 years. Soon I will embark the first of them here from Louisiana and the second within a few months. Dogs used in competitions in Japan are generally called rough dogs in honor of a small town that is on one of the southern islands where they supposedly originated. Although I have not yet seen one personally, the photographs portray them like dogs similar to Mastim, beige. Although competitions often take place on the island where Tosa, Japan, is situated, I found that driving directly for 10 hours to the north here has an area where competitions are popular during the winter months. The Japanese call them tournaments. I read a story about how pit bulls fought in the Rhine against Japanese Akita's dogs and giant Tosa and have always been the winners. So far around here, I have found nothing that indicated that an Akita is created to be a fight dog. I will check about it. As for the grooming, I'm tempted to put my APBT to compete against any of them, because fight dogs is cool and accepted as a sport in many areas of Japan. A friend of mine has watched some of these competitions for the past 3 years. He said dogs have different sizes and colors that makes me wonder if there are some pit bulls living in northern Japan. Before I left the United States, I heard that some pit bulls were shipped to Japan from time to time. This leads me to why I am writing this message to people who are as enthusiasts of the breed as I am. If any PBTA creator or enthusiast knows about some APBT that has been shipped to Japan, I would thank you if they sent me a note leaving me who, which one, when and where. I even write back. About what I read in Gazette lately, the humanists are really hitting us, admirers of the pit bull, hard in the United States. I am protected from this here in Japan, but it will affect me as much as to any APBT admirers when I return to the United States. We will have to try and educate the public about our dogs, refute opportunists, and then may in the end act in secret. I know that Gazette wisely does not publish any material that confies with the Act of the 1976 Animal Welfare and does not necessarily agree with letters and articles she publishes. But as long as the Animals Welfare Act has not applied here in Japan and Gazette doesn't have to agree with me, I would like other breeders to hear about my dog's last exploits. Buster arrived here in Tokyo in early February after I had to leave him in Louisiana until I saved enough to board him. You know that the military doesn't make so much money. Buster is not a special pit bull. Its ancestors include some brave and famous dogs, just like most other pit bulls. He is simply a big baby really. Once in Louisiana he jumped the fence and ran after the mail truck for almost an hour. With the certainty of having lost my dog to thieves, his postman finally brought him back to me and assured me that Buster would never be a good guard dog. I bought Richard Stratton's first book long before I learned that I would go to Japan, but I was intrigued when he wrote about how Mongol King fought and defeated all the other dogs, including a 60-pound Tosa from Japan. Mr. Stratton did not elaborate much about it and I had little credibility of Mongol King, who did not seem to have more than 30 pounds. At that time, the limited information given by Mr. Stratton coincided with mine, let's say, limited knowledge of our race. Before Buster arrived in Japan, I met a Japanese who had some Tosas. Through many signs of language, photos, and paintings drawn on the floor, we decided that I would be boarding a pit bull to Japan. When he arrived, I should take him here and there. Mr. Togai has 3 large males, a female with almost 30 pounds and a puppy. His older, 13-year-old dog is a 3-time champion and now used mainly as a coach for younger dogs. Being such an old dog, his teeth are well spent, but he still has a lot of fight inside him. The old warrior weighed far more than 60 pounds, but Buster, with 30 pounds, managed to be on the biggest dog. Once he discovered what he was doing, I think he was super happy that I was allowing him to mix a little. He climbed up and stayed there until I pulled him. This grooming had large folds of skin hanging from his jaw and Buster was really shaking. It wasn't hurting so much in the old dog, since he just was lying there, in a way wanting Buster to leave. The next time I took Buster in the city, I gathered him with 2 big things. Both weighed above 50 pounds. One was brought to the occasion by one of Mr. Toga's companions. In both meetings, Buster was so much faster and seemed to be so strong, if not the strongest, of the big dogs. All of these rough could do everything that was defense, since Buster was super offensive all the time. Reminds me of a kind of happy alligator in a duck breeding. Both meetings took almost 20 minutes each. The Tosas no longer want this happy pit bull from the United States. I do not think the grooming is created for courage, if the 6 or 7 I saw in action are representatives of the race. They seem to have a push/pull competition, so if one turns or gain, he loses. The relatively struggle without blood, along with the short duration, does not seem to lend itself to make a brave breed. And finally, they are not as beautiful as the pit bulls. This must be the end of Buster's illustrious career. Conditioning. I am not an expert, nor did I expect to be one when I have to characterize a dog. However, some rules of common sense and some established rules will often prevail. Everyone has their own trick on conditioning, and I don't want to open myself to a public meeting, but if anyone wants to ask me a question or two, they can send them to the magazine. The first and main aspect of shaping the dog is to have it as healthy as possible. I do not want to become very scientific, but to say that to keep your dog breathing appropriately, your red cells that carry oxygen in the blood should be working well. A trip to your local vet will be sufficient, and a complete blood test is of the utmost importance. Once this blood test is ready, it will also check the heartworms. The dog then needs to be examined to see if it has worms. This is easily done by bringing fresh feces to your vet. If your dog's blood is normal in the negative stool examination, then the work can proceed, slowly. More if a good dog was ruined with hard work while the dog was not prepared yet. I personally like to put a dog in a cable with at least 30 meters for 30 days, at least 60 days if it is a very fat dog. This will help the dog lose some weight. I always emphasize to take the dog for a walk on the collar. I know some people will disagree, but stroll with the dog not only helps the dog physically and emotionally, but helps me solve any problem that may appear. Walking can never mistreat a dog. So after I pass my dog for a required distance, and I'm going to talk about it in another article, I assure myself that it is exhausted before putting it on the treadmill, a device that makes the dog run in place. I like the type that has free rotation. The type a dog can easily pull. The work should be done with extreme care, as excessive work is so easy. What every creator expects to perform is to work the dog almost to exhaustion, but stop while the dog still has an interest in what he is doing. This is a key for conditioning, stopping before the dog is exhausted. If a dog does not start on the treadmill, put it on it and speak kindly with encouraging words. He will eventually gain his confidence and the work begins. Patience is the key here. Screaming and shouting, or, even worse, hitting the dog will never get anything. Start work slowly and don't be afraid to let your dog rest a day or two every week or more depending on the dog. Again, without being very scientific, all muscles must recover and regain to become strong. And remember, what we are looking for is a balanced athlete and not a lot of muscles. A good rule to follow for a dog on the treadmill, to see if you are hurting you or not, is keeping an eye on your tongue. If your tongue is out and wrapped around the tip and extends out, then stop. It may be time to take it out of the treadmill and walk with it for 10 minutes and clean your mouth with some fresh water. Basically, what I have to say may seem foolish to most creators who already know all this, but we are so paranoid about novices that maybe these things can help. Simply remember, a dog builds attitude and muscles in the same way as us. Extensive progress slowly reassures to harder and more lasting exercises. Think about it, and always talk to your dog and praise you during your exercises. It is also important to have a good, clean, insect-free bed, for your dog to have your own rest. The sunlight should never be neglected, and all fresh water, clean that can drink. I like to work, no diet, to get my dog a pound a week. I work for my dog to maintain your weight, while some people cut your dog's weight below your ideal weight and then work there. It must be easy, for now, seeing that working a dog is a fluidic situation. One of the greatest mysteries, and there is really none, in working a dog and finding what kind of work he likes best. This is not always easy, but it is worth the effort if you have a good dog. Some of them like the treadmill, others a swivel table, and some like to exercise the street while you ride your bike. You must be willing to learn, and it does not hurt to vary from exercise from time to time. Last but not least, for this article, it is never letting your dog be very thin. For years the creators thought a thin dog was a carved dog. Bah! A good rule would be to pay attention to your backbone, try to keep a good coating on it and keep it. If you think your dog is fine with 21 pounds, it won't hurt you. If you reach 22 pounds, it will be risky to reach 20 pounds. I will say more about this later, but in my opinion, I like to give an extra kilo to prepare it for later. How many times have you heard a creator say, he was much better in the fights? If some of you are a fan of boxing, simply remember what happened to Tommy Hearns. He had to wipe herself to reach 70 pounds. He managed to reach weight but in the process lost his devastating punch and strength. What about the fight? Sound familiar? Dogs are the same, and I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. A veteran, Ham Morris, used to have his dogs looking almost fat. It worked for him because he won against the types of Tudor and Corvino, and this was never an easy task. Of course, we all want to remove as much fat as possible without penetrating into the muscular tissue. Sounds hard? You can bet it is. In short, let me say that your dog should be healthy and you should be willing to exercise extensively, hard hours, and try to remember, patience is the key. Conditioning, Part 2. As I mentioned in my last article, conditioning your dog is an extremely slow and fluid consumption and situation. Long hours of hard, dedicated exercise are required of both the dog and the coach. For this reason, as I said in my last article, it is very important to know what type of exercise your dog likes to do. Most bulldogs are very active and athletic and like exercises, and with this type of dog, conditioning can prove to be easier and less strict. However, there are some dogs that are simply lazy and refuse to work. I start my dogs walking, and since most people can associate with the treadmill, we will use it. On the first day, I like to walk with my dog with a strong harness and a 6-meter collar. Always take a stick with you in case of an accident. Walk with the dog for 3 kilometers in a relatively calm place, car-free, pollution, etc. I personally like to climb and go down some hills during the ride. Put some pebbles in your pocket, and every 200 meters, throw one inside the thickets to maintain the dog's interest. Remember that dogs, like humans, suffer from boredom. After his 3 kilometers walk, his dog must have been exhausted, then the treadmill can be applied. 1 or 2 minutes will be enough. While I'm on the mat, let me put it, as Bill Anderson used to say, I never trusted a dog on the treadmill for more than 20 minutes. It is my own opinion that much exercise in the treadmill, accompanied by the lack of walks, will ruin the dog. After your dog has done your time required on the treadmill, clean your mouth, compliment it and take it for a walk until it cools off. Then 5 to 10 minutes of friction with your hands to help prevent inflammation. Then plenty of fresh water and it's time to eat. We'll talk more about food in another edition, but it's important to feed it at the same time every day, within half an hour. At this stage of training the dog should be isolated from other dogs. In general, I'm talking about 30 days of training, if the dog doesn't have 10 pounds about weight. Some prefer 45 days training, another 60 days and another 90 days. Excessive training, but can be equally devastating as the opposite may be. Keep in mind that every dog is different. In short, this article, I increased the distance from the tours no more than 800 meters per day, for a day or two, and then a gradual increase until it reaches 14 to 20 kilometers a day walking. I on purpose did not include the exercise on the treadmill because I can simply, safely, to say, increase the exercise in the treadmill or two every day until the dog is 40 to 60 minutes at the end of his training. Gradually, close to the end of training, 5 to 7 days, cut the work in the treadmill by half, each day for 5 days. In other words, if your dog is doing 45 minutes on the 24th day, on the next day for 27 minutes, next day to 14 minutes, the next 7 and next 3 minutes. This will take your dog to a peak. For some variations, I personally like to take my dog to this 160-acre farm that is behind me and let it loose. It is more natural and much less tedious for the dog. Vary this exercise and always remember that a day off, or even 2, will not hurt your dog. Some conditioners will panic with a bruised foot or a dog with pain. All I can say is to get cold. I also understood that it is not everyone who lives in the countryside, however, no matter where you live, you can put a dog in good condition. I again want to reinforce that all this is basic knowledge, however, fundamental bases are sometimes neglected. None of us want to reinvent the wheel, but there is nothing wrong to go back to the basics. If we can just remember that the dog needs strength, resistance, air, good rest, good food, clean water and a lot of love, we will all go far. I have no unpleasant secrets kept, and I lose both and gain. Strange as it may seem, I don't know anyone who has won them all. I personally believe that many dogs are conditioned on chemicals and stimulants, but nothing can take place from good natural food and exercises. Ask Pat. I have studied the different methods used to produce winning dogs for 15 years. I also read everything I could find about the creation methods and ideas of the past. I am sure many of the readers did the same study. I think most successful creators agreed that deep courage was the main good that a dog needed to win. Some creators even said courage was the only thing to create. They said strong bite and talent were not past consistency, but the courage yes. In fact, if a dog had too much skill, they didn't want any part of it in creation. He was considered to bite more strongly out of fear. I have created my own dogs for a long time to have some ideas of their own. I think courage is the most important thing to create if you want your dog to win consistency. I think other goods are important and they are passed simply as courage. Alongside courage, I could consider tolerance, strength, natural air, or whatever you want to call, the most important thing a dog can have. Two dogs may be both in equal excellent conditions and one will simply last longer than the other. If a dog loses his courage, he loses. If a dog loses its gas, he loses. After courage and strength, I consider the ability the next in importance. By total skill, I mean dogs that you can hold your clumps while avoiding punishment for yourself. Waist ability helps the dog to tie what he wants or out of a mooring. A smart fighter knows when to save energy or when to go to the offensive or defense. He can also change his style if he has to. A strong bite can help any dog win. In some cases, that's all he needs to win. However, I will put the strong bite behind courage, energy and all the ability around the average importance. I do not believe that an extra strong bite is biting strong for fear. Many strong biters like C.H. Marcel proved a lot of courage when they couldn't win. A strong bite is just as likely to have as much courage as a light bite. I noticed that any gross dogs of another breed other than pit bulls seem to have more bite and skill than they seem. The reason for this is that they do not spare energy. They use all the power and strength they have, and after 20 or 30 minutes they will slow down and then abandon. If you see a dog like this for a short time, they are very impressive. A fight dog with the same ability will not show you everything can in 20 minutes. He will keep something for the last part, as Alex Argello. I believe that all these goods, courage, strength, skill, and bite, are genetically transmitted to puppies. Dog genetic makeup is a product of dogs of its provenance. Tombstone was a fight dog with an average bite, but he generated exceptional dogs like CHA. Snubby, CH Reno, the Great, CH Hope, and CH Tonka. Why? His parent was Maloney's Toot, one of the strongest bite of all time. Toot was the son of Tutors Spike and Black Widow, by Carver, both of very strong bites. Another son of Maloney's Toot, Davis, was a fight dog with bite within the average. Davis generated the famous Chore Gal Sunday female as well as other strong biters. A dog can bite very strong, but if none of the litters and some of their ancestors bit strong, then their puppies will probably not bite strong on average. If a dog is a strong bite of a strain bite puppy's lineage, then it will probably produce several strong bite puppies. This would be true for other goods as well. The bravest usually wins, but sometimes not. There were times when a competition dog was won by a less courage dog. He is winning from the beginning and he is quite competitive not to give up when things are going his way. I cannot agree on creation for courage alone. A low-skill fighting dog will usually beat an aggressive dog from another breed. But what happens when a fighting dog with little skill finds a dog that is almost so competitive with much more skill? I think you know what happens. Creating for a strong bite of all things becomes popular occasionally. This theory says that if you keep creating super boarders together you will have dogs that easily destroys your opponents. Competitiveness is secondary in this theory. It's more popular than it was, let's say 20 years ago. Some creators claim that they developed these super boarders. They call these dogs fearful. They are too much for simple competition dogs and win their fights in 20 minutes or less, so they say. These creators are almost always novice in the competition or not so intelligent if they have been with dogs for a while. They have little respect for a dog that needs more than an hour to win. Any dog that needs 2, 3 or 4 hours to win is harmless according to them. If one of their dogs wins a long competition, but they say this proves that their dogs are brave. These guys never have a record of victory to prove their theories. In fact, no really successful creator who creates a large number of victorious has never created their dogs with a strong bite as the main target. Yes, there is something real in the theory of fearful dogs that win without courage. But it never works on a large scale under a period of time. Here are some reasons because it doesn't work. First, the strongest bite are extravagant that bite stronger than any of their ancestors. They almost never bring down dogs that bite as strong as they bite. Have you ever Jimmy Boots toppled a dog that bite as much as he? No. Mangram's Shorty was the hardest bite I've ever seen, but none of her puppies bites like her. How many children of Art bite like him? None. Usually these super dogs bring down harder boarders than average, but no super bite or extravagant just like them. Second, no dog, no matter how fearful, can count on an easy victory always. Jimmy Boots and Benny Bob crushed their opponents in advance as flies. When they met, they fought for more than 2 hours. Courage, strength, and conditioning played a larger role than the bites. Benny Bob made faster, but he lost in the course. A strong bite is like a hard punch of a boxer and should be broken on the target for an advantage. Sometimes dogs but hard to win are dogs like the little Braddock or Bolio, that never lets the strong bite nothing more than air. Dogs like Chingling, Bolio, Strider, and Braddock will not win many fights in 20 minutes or less. But they can beat dogs that have a long line of quick victories in their favor. Cracker and Nigger were terrible boarders, but when they faced each other for almost 3 hours. When two high-quality dogs meet, it usually takes a while no matter how many lower dogs they destroyed in a short period. A strong bite can easily win in local fights. When he improves in class and finding a truly good dog, he will need all his courage, strength and skill he has. Strong bite alone does not end in good competition. I have 5 dogs that I use a lot like breeding dogs. Only 2 of them die exceptionally strong. The other 3 are only in the middle of the average. All 5 dogs have extreme courage and strength, and come from a dog line with these attributes. When I look at my own backyard for a breeding dog, I get more impressed with a competitive dead dog, with a lot of breath like Jeep or Homer, than a destroyer like Panama Red or Pit General. Maybe Panama Red can take 3 hours if he has to. You know that Jeep and Homer can do this, and this is good to know. When a creator tries too much to get strong maniciders, the courage will suffer. Of course, if you can find a good, breeding competitive dog with a good breath, which bites like never before, you are in business. I create my dogs for courage, strength and style first, and if I can add bite to my dogs without losing the first 3 goods, of course, I do it. Constantly terrible biters seem to come now and do not pass their bites with consistency. When you hear about an extremely competitive dog, very breathtaking, it usually comes from dogs like these. Courage and strength will place their dogs in the circle of the winners more constantly than will be the strong bite. The female is equal to the male for generating quality dogs. I want the same courage and strength in a breeder I want in a male. There are many creators who think that only the bitch's lineage is important and not their courage or skill. They will show that Jack Dempsey's mother or Joe Louis never fought. This comparison is invalid. People are not created to fight. Maybe Dempsey's father has never had a fight either. We all know that there are many brave competition dogs. Certainly a competition dog will produce more competitive dogs than his mestizo sister. The best dogs today are probably more punished than the dogs of the past, but courage and strength are just as important today as it used to be. Pit Bull, a dog for you. After more than 20 years of active involvement in Schutzhund sport and efforts to create dogs eminently for policing work, especially during my stay in Europe, I came to a surprising conclusion: American Pit Bull is the best dog than truly sportsman can have. This is what happened. A Sunday of that memorable 1980 spring, my friend Ed Wagner brought a dog he called the Thermomix Firehand to our training session and said he wanted to go to the sport. I looked at that little spotted dog, reminding me at that moment a turning TRO, and smiled with a disadvantaged disdain. But I quickly changed my opinion. As green as he was, Bim was dynamite when I put on the sleeve. We started training Thermomix and I learned my first lesson: I never train a breed with pit bull behavior as you would train your pastor or Doberman. A good pit bull is a doing or die that only needs some polishing in the technique to exceed protection exercises. Early on I learned my second lesson: if a pit bull doesn't come from a behavioral lineage, but it is not a real pit bull. My friend was looking for a good, healthy young dog to show the pattern of her parents over 30 pounds, we thought at that time that in pit bulls as the best. We found the worst way: it cost us a lot of money, as it is in real life. Staffordshires and pit bulls to be competition dogs are just or as bad as our shepherds and Dobermans, and because there is no significant difference, we will be much better getting our regular races. Until there we put adulatings, from the appropriate perspective of such dogs, also pit bulls, which were intermittently continued in respective magazines. I personally always thought such dogs were more aligned with funny rarities than being taken seriously as competitors for experienced Schutzhund. On the other hand, there seems to be a demand for Staffordshires and pit bulls created to be docile, and as a general rule reproductors of such puppies are now wanting a very high price for their products. Finally, we get the true animal, and now they can say in the light of the pit bull's experience created as a fight dog or something else. In them you have over 100 years of American wisdom and creation for courage, athletic and bite skill lasts brought by some of the most dedicated people the dog world has ever known. Considering the Schutzhund sport, translating these characteristics of pit bull's hardness, an enthusiastic attitude for work and intelligence, and you can have a reward with a stable temperament, a friendly attitude for people. But never make a mistake and underestimate the magnificent pit bull. True pit bulls can be relentless fighters, they are dogs of fighting or dying. You should be sure that your pit bull does not take the protective work so seriously. This is where is the main difference between a true pit bull and another guard dog. When training your pastor, in most cases you are building confidence and developing courage. Never admitting this, European, for example, German, training methods, properly imported to North America, assumes that the cowardly animal is being educated to fight man. A good pit bull has more courage, confidence and enthusiasm you have never seen. You better make him or she strictly a mango dog that will hit hard and hang on the mango for pure pleasure and with the tail shaking, indifferently whether it is used by you, a stranger, or hanging on a tree. It may seem sacrilege to you, but it's just a frank warning, if you don't take it seriously, you may be getting a lot of problems. And don't worry, your pit bull won't turn your back to a stir and will always do it better when working with the sleeve than any other dog. But not everything is roses. When you are talking about a pit bull created like a grooving dog, you should keep in mind that the dog fight is against the law everywhere. The media did more than enough to portray the dogs of Rhine as indomitable and uncontrollable and their owners as insensitive criminal. This is an image that you should face if you, like a serious Schutzhunder, start looking for a real pit bull. You will be tempted to look for a pit bull or even a Staffordshire and most likely end a dog created for display and estimation quality. Think that similar performances were made to our Shepherds and Dobermans, not to mention the Boxers and other known races once as excellent service dogs. Do not take it wrong for order in the past of a dog of basically exposure or family pet. Your pastor probably has a better pedigree for this. If you waste time to educate yourself and find the truth, you should be rewarded with a dog whose dream has come true. Simply be aware of suitors and nightclubs, they are on pit bulls as well. There is a single opportunity for every sincere sportsman. In North America we preserve, throughout its vitality, the dog breeds developed and maintained especially for performance and competition. As they are not yet damaged by the institution as exposure and estimation dogs or completely exterminated by hysteria, malice or envy of private groups trying to manipulate public opinion. These dogs have better potential than you can wait for the high price of importing common Schutzhunter dogs. But these performance dogs need legitimate protectors to be preserved as performance dogs in the future. Remember, they are dogs that were selected in the past by American history to represent the American spirit as friends of arms for bulldogs who stayed into the image of the tenacity of the British people. It depends on you to make the pit bulls champions of our species. These good old American fighters definitely have the necessary qualities. The scientific approach. Although I like people, I really like it. I sometimes get impatient to the bridge of apoplexy regarding the natural immunity of reason that is an integral part of human nature. It is apparently easier to deal with our embedded prejudices than to open our minds for a scientific approach, that is, to examine the evidence that gives rope to our pre-programmed reactions. And it is not only for pit bulls that this is particular, vexatious aspects of human nature takes place, but it is certainly its worse. Each Rhine dog creator told me, in fact, you can't say that the dog fight is a good thing. The public will simply not accept this. Well, I never followed this way. With my characteristic patience, which job envy, I repeatedly explained that I am concerned only that the dog fight is not represented as excessively horrible, resulting in an result that is harmful to the American pit bull. But is there a good aspect in the dog fight? Well, of course, there is the APBT breed that will not be around without the burning sport that forges its existence. But I suppose there are some poor harassed individuals who think we could run out of race and yet survive. Others could discuss psychologically that the end does not justify the means. But are there other beneficial effects? I personally think so. I once received a letter, in fact an article but written to me, from a guy who was presumably from a low socioeconomic past, but obviously with high native intelligence. In this small epistle, he spent at a length of basically a boring life and his other young group directed before his interests in fight dogs. They worked during the day and spent the nights and end of weeks on bars. On a good night, they may get involved in 2 or 3 bar fights. But once one of them became interested in pit bulls, the enthusiasm became contagious, and as soon as they had at least 1 pit bull each, they began to waste less time, because now they had their dogs to lean, books to read, and study about lineage. Soon they were involving their dogs in amateur fights, and some of them gluing them in the laughs. Now they had no time to go to the bars, because they were very busy working with their dogs, and a good way to put themselves in good physical condition is to work a dog. They became more aware of their health and diets and completely changed their lifestyles. Their involvement with dogs not only had a good effect on them, but also helped the community, calming, in their own words, one of the most problematic elements. Now, of course, some will say that any hobby or other intense interest would have the same effect. However, there are few hobbies that attract people of this type. They are not plausible to relate amateurly to archaeology or astronomy, it simply would not seem relevant to them. But a fight dog, this is really something else. Fighting is a respected part of such men's lifestyle, and they can appreciate skill and courage in a dog, too. In this way they become totally involved in possibly the only activity that will cause their intellects. It is for this reason, perhaps, that pit bull has an appeal in minorities. Consequently, the Irish are an important part in the history of pit bull. And the tremendous influx of immigrants in the country now probably tells a good deal of pit bull's popularity growth. Now I can imagine the humanists smiling maliciously to all this, but I think there is a validity for it. Anyway, I will never want to get stuck with the controversy that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the dog fight. My interest is focused more on dogs than in their fights. Still, I have to admit that there were times when I was absolutely excited by a dog's acts of heroism in a rising, usually a small and smart fighter dog that could neutralize a spectacle, biting his opponent tightly and throwing him far enough, or even an impressive scratch by a losing dog in poor condition lick the blood or touch the heart to a point of leva to tears. However, there were many things I saw in Rhine competitions that I usually wouldn't have seen and would rather never happened. But with almost equal regularity, I saw examples of cruelty to exhibition dogs, pasture dog judgments, retriever judgments, and hunts for coons, a kind of raccoon-like animal, so the fraternity of the Rinha dog certainly it does not have the monopoly of cruelty. And if everyone did everything right, there would be no cruelty. Thus an important task for us all is to educate and influence transgressors. Even if I had no interest in pit bulls, if they were somehow surgically eliminated, for example, I would still feel that the best way to improve dog fate would be to work from the inside, not by applying negative pressure from outside. In one of the Asian countries, dog competitions are legal, and the analogy of these countries to AKC, American Kennel Club, points to the judges. In fact, judges are usually conformation judges, too. Now, which country do you think dogs have a better destination in life, there or here? In the meantime, as humanists chatter their absurdities about the Rhine dog creator, competitions, and dogs, they are not always completely unharmed, as an occasional reporter will show a little healthy skepticism and even do 1 or 2 appropriate questions. For example, the representative field for the United States Humanist Society, which is a self-appointed expert in dog fight and an extremely rough noise maker regarding oppression legislation against the sport, was once asked if he was not giving much importance of the animal's welfare over that of humans. His answer was that he felt that he was helping humans directing our society about this objectionable practice. He was also deducting that this vicious activity was a bad influence for young people in America and the incidence of crimes. Well, first of all, HSUS. He has not been uniquely successful in annihilating this vicious practice. As for the effect of the dog fight on morals or crime, I would say that there are little or none. However, I would welcome an incident or crime comparison in our country with that of Japan. In Japan, the dog fight is cool and open. Also in Japan, there is a minimal fraction of crimes that abounds in the United States. Finally, I will respond later to this field representatively. I don't want to name them, because these people thrive with advertising saying that we feel that we are doing people a favor, too, fighting against oppressive legislation. Oppression in any way and for what good reasons should be avoided, because it is right against this group, which everyone despises, tomorrow will include another group. And unfortunately, their existences tend to be their only justifications. The reader will notice that I avoided mentioning the Asian country in which the confirmation judges also judge dog competitions. I was concerned that the animal welfare groups would direct their energies concerning the improvement of the situation there. I was not concerned with mentioning Japan because a number of articles have already appeared, with photos, of legalized dog fights. Surprisingly, the coverage I saw has not been negative anyway, as it has been emphasized that dogs do not hurt themselves and that they are venerated and treated as award-winning running horses. For some reason, it is easy to be objective and tolerant with a culture outside than a subculture within our own country. Still, I hope the humanist groups intensify the pressure, and we can eventually see the moment when legalized dog fights will find an end in Japan, too. Such things are called progress by the humanists. An example of similar progress occurred in Thailand, formerly Zion. The peasants of that country developed a sport to put to fight a domestic species of indigenous wild fish for that country named Betta splendens, the well-known betta, or Siamese fight fish. Well, of course, the humanists were horrified. No matter that fishing professionals ensure the public that very little cruelty has been involved. Fights end when one of the competitors suspends hostilities, and the greatest damage usually consisted of shredding the fins. And anyway, how could anything be compared to the way fish are devastated in fishing? Against all the reasons and common sense, humanists have prevailed, and now the poor peasants of Thailand are, in the at least, forbidden theory of having one of their few amusements. Of course, passing laws against activities necessarily stops nothing or even decrease it. Of course, criminals can no longer be free on anything, and all procedures must be required. This way the dog fight became illegal in Japan, it will simply be secret. It follows that dogs will not have a height negotiation, and that the level of people would fall. As it is now, some of the finest people participate, and it is an honor to have a good fight dog. Dogs do not fight for money, but merely for the honor of winning, similar to the exhibitions or field trial in that country. For many years, the Japanese have been hampered because they did not have a line of dogs' descendants as pure as the APBT. That is, they had to fight the Tosas, which were good enough and certainly they were great and impressive, but they were not practically a pair for the pit bulldog. Recently, however, the Japanese became alert to the quality of our dogs and began to import them. Some creators confidentially claim that in 5 years they will have better pit bulls than we have. It may not be an ostentation for nothing, because the Japanese have been shaking progress in all areas of modern technology using a scientific approach. How ironic if at any future date we will have to import good dogs from Japan.